I'm gonna see if I can make a thing on that later, perhaps. And the old cattle raider. I'll see if I can make a short on that later. But nobody's coming into our chat. We're just gonna talk amongst ourselves about random shit that we normally talk about. Jesus Christ, it's empty. No Jim O'Neill or anything this morning.
No, he's busy. I didn't think I was going to make it, but the play was quicker. The nativity was quicker than I thought.
Oh yeah, it's that time of year, isn't it? Where the kids come wandering by.
Yeah, nativity plays.
Yeah. Got to make sure as well. Do you know what? I'll make sure that's on. I was what's it called? What happened last time? Oh, do we have people coming in now? Do we? Oh, Cat's in anyway. Cat being the only person watching us today. What is it called? Let me pop over actually and see the context. Sometimes, if my last stream was very bad, for some reason it sets it on to child mode and blocks my comments for my next live. So sometimes I have to actually go over and see what the settings are to this, just to make sure. Would you believe it? And actually did the same thing again. That makes sense. Okay, that's why no one was coming into my stream. I don't know what it is as well. If this isn't set to Big Brother is definitely watching us, right? That's the second time that's happened. That's the second time that's happened. I actually didn't believe that would happen again. It actually did happen, right? So, yeah, I know we have people coming in. How are we keeping? How are we doing? Can you all hear us fine? Can you? But what was I saying? Yeah, Big Brother's watching us. Because I get a special shot. Yeah, it seems like that. But no, I think now since I've put that setting back on, it seems to be starting to flow. Maybe we'll check there. But yeah, that's the second time that's happened to me where lads would be saying something mad in the last live stream, and what was it called? It'll set my next live stream automatically onto children's mode, like children protection gets put into my next live stream. So I have to actually by myself go into the context, and then set it back from child mode to being back up to open again, which is funny, like, you know. Let me have a look, because I don't even know if that's AI. That could be AI that's doing that, you know. Yeah. Is hearing words that it finds offensive. Because what was it? The lads last night. So he started deleting comments in my last live stream. And the reason why it was deleting comments in my last live stream was because lads were telling me to throw her overboard. So we were, you were there, were you? Yeah, you were there, weren't you? Yeah. So I was watching the comments go up, and it was just deleting the comments. And some of the lads were typing in was throw her overboard, put her overboard. And I just saw the comments popping up, and it was a few of them like popping up and getting deleted straight away. And you remember I was teasing the lads and stuff about it. And what was it called? I just checked the thing there, and it set it back to children mode. Let me have a quick gawk at it. So into YouTube Studio, and then over to content. So you click on content, go over to live, and I always have to check this to make sure I'm being monetized, and then I click on the video itself, and sometimes it's set onto no, it's not made for kids. Oh, sorry. Yes, it's made for kids, right? Or no, it's not made for kids. And if there's been comments, like a certain amount of comments deleted by the AI in the last live stream, it will automatically set my next live stream to, yes, it's made for kids. I don't know what the hell that's about. So I have to manually, and you see, the problem is I don't know how that works. But if it's set to, yes, it's made for kids, it doesn't like put me on the home, the home tab or whatever it's called. So people don't see, they don't get notifications and stuff that I'm live right now. Which is not good for my channel, of course, but yeah, I had to right there and then I had to go over and set it to no, it's not made for kids, and then it pops up on the home stream and stuff again. So then people can see the notification and jump back in. Funny, like, very, very funny.
Yeah. Is Owen joining you fellas tonight? He might be here in about an hour and a half. Maybe he had some family commitments that sort of clashed with this. So he's going to try and make it. And hopefully we'll get him for the last maybe hour, half an hour. But we can neither confirm or deny his presence later, because it depends on it's got quite a long drive ahead of him. So I guess it's down to traffic, really.
Yeah. I need to grab a drink of water as well. I'll do that in a bit once we start getting the ball rolling with the waffle and stuff. I'll start up the chat as well, since we got people coming in now and stuff. How's everyone feeling today? Everyone good? How's the cat doing? Chat went all weird with me today. Not reason when I am trying to publish. What do you mean by chat went all weird with you today? Is that not shadow banning? Yeah. Yeah, I know, right?
I never get in trouble from YouTube, but TikTok, God, TikTok hates me.
Yeah, TikTok is very, very cranky, even on my side as well. I don't think I've gotten ever accepted for a live stream for TikTok. So
TikTok, honestly, TikTok loves my like waffly live streams that I do. It loves them. You know, with the map and everything like that. But I don't enjoy them as much. They're very mentally draining. I can't really go into detail. So when I do my members only lives on Thursday, it's just a slideshow, effectively like this, except for I'm not on the maybe I need to be on the camera. But oh God, it hates me, and then it just ends up banning me throughout the live stream and telling me off. And you know, I'm half tempted to just like not have members on TikTok and just tell them to move across to YouTube. It's cheaper anyway. Like,
that's wild. No, I do all my stuff over on Discord, and I might just end up doing it on Patreon, since Patreon now has completely tidied itself up. And I think I've never had anything whatsoever said on Patreon. I think you could literally, unless you were to start switching over to, God, how do I word this without getting into trouble? But unless you really push the limits with Patreon, and I mean like stuff that would end you in jail, I don't think you could get in trouble with Patreon, you know. Because I've got like insane crazy stuff, because I cover medieval stuff obviously over on the Patreon, and so far I've really pushed the limits on Patreon, and not like nothing whatsoever. Like, so yeah, I definitely would advise jump over to Patreon. What was it called? Late getting here, but here. Oh, how are you keeping, Kelt? Any news with yourself? I suppose we'll start chatting about the Gaelic Resurgence as well, and how it's compatible with the old 100 Years' War and stuff. And then we'll do another chat about the Gaelic Resurgence next week as well. But next week, it will be Dr. Owen O'Neill. We'll start up the conversation. I just want to, this week, kind of focus on the bigger picture of the Gaelic Resurgence. Not just in Ireland as well, but what's happening in the bigger picture. Of course, this is the map at the very start of the Gaelic Resurgence in Ireland. And as Micheál there will highlight and then expand into a wee bit more, is the fact that a lot of this map will start to quickly start disappearing as we start to see especially the Hiberno-Normans, the Anglo-Irish, as they're starting to get referred to as from academic perspective. Because remember, both the word Hiberno-Norman and Anglo-Irish are both modern terms to simplify the conversation. But regardless, who we refer to from a very modern perspective as the Hiberno-Normans start to become more Irish than the Irish themselves, until eventually, at the end of the Gaelic Resurgence, at around 1450, we start to see the map looking more like this, okay? with the green side obviously highlighting the more Gaelic Gael side, and from a modern perspective, the blue part of that map highlighting the kind of Anglo-Irish side. And when we say Anglo-Irish, we mean people who are kind of between both the Gaelic Gael worlds, the native world of the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers, and people who are between the English side as well. I suppose one of the best examples of that is just after the 14th century, when we get into the Butler Talbot feud, when you have the likes of Seamus, the White Earl Butler, and you have James the Usurper Fitzgerald, who are somewhat fighting the English, but technically speaking, in their opinion, they are not. Even when Seamus the White Earl Butler is attacking and killing English colonists, and he's attacking English forces who, and this is the key most important part of all, led by Talbot. They're not led by the English king. So Butler will always highlight the fact that, hey, technically speaking, I'm not at war with the English king. The reason why the English king, of course, is not at war with Butler is because most likely he's just too young to be getting involved with that sort of politics. He takes over when he's a child. And so Seamus always highlights the fact that he's not at war with the English, technically speaking. Technically speaking, he's very loyal to the English crown. And so he, at one stage, while he, Talbot is at, in France fighting against Joan of Arc, he decides to go for an old holiday over to England to see his cousins with the Fitzgeralds. So it highlights the fact that although these characters are at war with the English, they see themselves as part of both the Gaelic world and the English world, going between the two. Although, the Desmond Fitzgeralds, for example, also having cousins and stuff over in England, will also at the same time, some of them can't even speak English. Going into the later stages of the 15th century, they have to get translators over to talk to the Fitzgeralds, which comes as no surprise, because did these guys ever learn English to start with, especially when they were originally, as we say, quote unquote, Hiberno-Normans, people who spoke Old French and Gaelic. So at what stage did anyone come over and ever, Englishize them, I suppose, in many ways?
Well, you see that with the statutes of 1345 that are, saying to adopt English dress, refuse Irish customs. It's written in Latin because, the nobody speaking English at the time over there, and they don't realize that, and the only mutual language that they can both speak to each other in legal documents effectively is Latin. So you've got these families that are come across speaking this Normandy French. It's basically a variation of French. Most French people would understand it to a degree, and they literally land in Wales. They spend a generation in Wales, if that, and then they're in Ireland. So they like I say, they haven't been accustomed to this thing. I'm not saying they didn't speak any English, probably enough to pass by formal greetings and before you get down to business, speaking another a mutual language, whether that be Gaelic with your Gaelic tenants, or Latin with your clergy, or French with foreign diplomats, and so yeah, it's a bit of a mishmash for some of these families. And like I say, the Butlers actually, it's one of the things that the Butlers are renowned for. One event actually being translating a very famous document that I can't remember, but it's one of these statutes that come in from England. They're the ones that have to translate it in Irish for the English government, even though they are very pro-English. They obviously know Irish because of their tenants, etc., and their allies and their rivals. So they effectively have to translate it in Irish so that the message could then be conveyed to the rest of the local populace. So yeah, I will just put a caveat to what Philip had said earlier about 1450. We already discussed this off stream beforehand, that there's no real consensus on when the Gaelic Resurgence sort of starts. So I tend to do it from about 1350 to 1500. And Philip has a few extra different dates there, but he's more liberal with his dates. But we're just saying that if you see a date 1450, we're not maybe going to stop right there. There's bleed overs on both sides. So don't feel confused if we suddenly start going into 1333, which is an important event which we will cover. There's no like someone to wake up and go, right, that's the start of the Gaelic Resurgence today, Tuesday, 1350. So it's a bit like any day. When is the end of the Viking Age? Well, it depends who you ask. So there's a bit of a either side. There's a bit of a gray area of when it starts.
I think that's the problem with most cultural revolutions, because this is a mixture of both a cultural revolution and it's a fight back against English control. And it's funny because just like the punk revolution, in many ways, you have a group of people who don't realize what they're doing. It's not until, as you point out there, the Statutes of Kilkenny in 1366, then there's a sudden like, you're doing something, stop doing what you're doing. Because, as we pointed out there, like the Fitzgeralds never sat down and learned English. There was never a point where they ever needed to learn English. As we pointed out there, they originated from Normandy. In 1066, they invaded into England to fight the Anglo-Saxons. And at that point in 1066, there is no English that we know of today. You have a very German Saxon language that exists in England with the arrival of the Normans, who are all French speakers. Norman Old French speakers is the dominant language amongst them. They eventually win the Battle of Hastings, of course. And from there, the Fitzgeralds end up, and other Anglo-Normans or Cambro-Normans, depending on what you want to refer to them as, end up settling in Wales. And at the time, they are referred to as the Knights of the Welsh Marshes. They're not even referred to in the actual literature itself at the time as Cambro-Normans or Anglo-Normans. But at the same time, we need to highlight that they're never referred to as English knights or anything like that. The Fitzgerald connection and stuff. And then from there, obviously, they invade into Ireland, if you want to call it invasion, especially in fact, when you have the likes of Diarmaid MacMorrough, who hires them as mercenaries, which highlights the sort of blur that's going on as they go into Ireland and start to take over and occupy land, especially around the Clare and West Cork, and also the Kerry areas. As you can see there in the map, you can see how the earldom of Desmond dominates those regions during the medieval era. I just want to get a quick drink there while you say your little bit there. I'm just completely ignore what you're saying. No, I'm joking.
No, I'm going to go to the comment section and just say, Caveman, I appreciate that you're recommending both our 100%. Channels for friends and families. And, what is your... I wonder whether Philip should be here for this, but which is your favourite branch of Fitzgerald? Is it the Desmond branch or the Kildare branch? I don't think any self-respecting Irishman could agree with the Kildare branch. It's Desmond branch. They Gaelicize themselves. Or see what Philip says. Philip, what's your favourite branch of Fitzgerald? Is it the Desmond branch or the Kildare branch?
Oh, 100% the Desmond branch.
See, nobody's saying the Kildare branch.
The Kildare branch is actually very, very exciting from the perspective of Tudor politics, if you're into Tudor politics and you're very much into Anglo-Irish culture inside of England, like if you're, for example, you're from Manchester or Liverpool, and you're interested in Irish politics inside of the Tudor court, I would definitely go with the Kildare Fitzgeralds for sure. The thing for me is the fact that I'm actually around. I live from Mallow, like I'm from Mallow, like, and I've spent, like, my father and stuff is from Limerick and Cork and all that region. So we're very much. I've always kind of grown up from inside of the world of the Desmond Fitzgeralds. So that's always kind of the world I've been kind of attracted into. Even though, like, I like the magic of the Desmond Fitzgeralds, especially going into the period of the Wars of the Roses in Ireland and the fighting between the Desmond Fitzgeralds and the Butlers over the title of Lord Deputy of Ireland and the Battle of Piltona and stuff. I just think they're all brilliant. And then going from there into the Tudor conquest of Ireland, when you had the Fitzgeralds fighting against the Tudor monarchy and stuff. Absolutely love all that stuff, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with me. So my family's from traditionally an area held by the O'Hanlons. Then it becomes the O'Neills of the Fews. So you kind of like, I think you all your history, all your monuments, all your castles, all these things that are these symbols of these families are everywhere growing up, even ones that you maybe don't recognize or register. And it's just, I think it just suddenly becomes a part of your journey of growing up. So the O'Hanlons, I always had a thing for the O'Hanlons and the O'Neills growing up because inadvertently those symbols and those names, like we had the IFA cinema in Banbridge, and the O'Hanlons with Lords of IFA. So you just sort of like these terms, these words, these symbols are just constantly imprinted in your brain. And the next thing you know, you feel it's like common bonding to these sort of families and these sort of things without even realizing it. Sometimes you read into them and then you find out they're complete bastards, like, and then, but it's it's the same even now, like where I live right now, it's pure savages. The savages family is, you'd be hard pressed to actually find a native association with any family in that area. The savages just completely dominate it. And I know people now in the area with the surname Savage, and it's just constantly like, I know this guy, he's a good guy. Suddenly I'm just liking the Savages, even if they're a Norman family. So yeah, it's just one of those things. I guess it, what is it, nostalgia or something that like plays into that a wee bit.
Oh, it definitely does. Like Dennis then highlighting, wasn't there a wizard Earl Kildare? There sure was, who sounded kind of interesting. Might be the folklore. No. There really was a wizard Earl Fitzgerald up and around the Kildare area and stuff. He was the one that was involved with the Arlcalmain and stuff, wasn't he, Mihal? Or have you not covered?
No, I can't think of him. He's not coming to mind. The name sort of rings a bell, and I think there was, if I remember, but I could be blending multiple Fitzgeralds together there. I struggle with individuals, like Ping and unless they were a really dominant like figure in a history, like your Niall Glundoves, like your but I wouldn't know Niall's cousins. I wouldn't know his descendants, every descendant. So I do wider, but I do remember there was a Fitzgerald very much into alchemy and very much into,
that's the one.
But I wouldn't know if it was actually him.
Yeah. The Wizard Earl, I do have to sit down and actually do a proper short and stuff on him, because I haven't done because he pops up around the late Tudor era and stuff, up around the area, and I haven't gone around to actually doing proper research. Owen O'Neill would definitely know more about the Wizard Earl than I would, simply because he's been doing the 9 Years' War for quite some time, and that's just before all of that stuff kicks off, I'm sure. From what I remember, all right. But that's a very interesting time because they were involved. The Kildare Fitzgeralds were very much involved with Elizabeth's court at that point and trying to tidy everything up in Ireland and stuff, especially the way that Queen Elizabeth was behaving like an absolute lunatic. Another very interesting comment as well by Caveman, just going back to what we originally were saying about the conquest in England and stuff. The last real English king was Harold Godwinson. Since then, England has become ruled by foreign monarchs. There's two things I just want to highlight with that one is the fact that when it comes down to our interpretation, of course, we would support Harold Godwinson, especially with Diarmaid MacMorrough. What was it there? Yeah, Diarmaid MacMorrough, king of not just Leinster at the time, but also allegedly High King of Ireland, who was sending troops over to support Harold Godwinson and try to get back that crown for his children after his death in the Battle of Hastings in 1066. So definitely a very interesting time indeed. But on saying that, I always do find it interesting how the English define themselves as Anglo-Saxon. I suppose they would do against the Welsh. They don't define themselves as anywhat Celtic. I always did find that interesting, and how they don't see the Anglo-Saxons as being dictators over them. They see themselves as Anglo-Saxons, especially when studying into the DNA and literature. It seems to be that the relationship between the native Celtic people, the Romo Britons, and the Anglo-Saxons was actually much more complicated than what we first originally thought, because we first thought it was just a complete, genocide. The Anglo-Saxons went in, genocided the local people, blew them out of it. But now it seems to be that every local area had a complicated relationship with the incoming Anglo-Saxons. Just popping away there at the comment section.
Celtic Hound asked one earlier.
What's that?
Celtic Hound asked one earlier, and I meant to.
Oh, yeah. I'll pop that one in there for you.
I can answer this one in, but the problem with it comes with etymology. There's no crane or any of those variation mentioned in the documents at the time. But crane is also a variation of crean or creen. And if you are related to them, the only family I can think of are the Efiacra branch in Tyrone, who are kings kings of Efiacra Ardstraw, or Ardstratha, sorry, now modern day Ardstraw, in Tyrone. They actually end up getting, during this time, during the Gaelic Resurgence, the O'Neills, which I'm sure we'll cover, the O'Neills start to expand south. And they've recently just kicked the McLaughlins out about a century before. And they start, after consolidating, they start pushing south, and they push the Creans or Creans out of the Efiacra territory, their ancestral lands in Tyrone. So that's the only variation of the name that I could really think of that it would sort of fall into that time period. But I don't know if you're Crean, or if you would know if you're a Crean, relationship. But that's the only one that sort of sticks out.
Interesting. All right. What's where was I waffling on about? Oh yeah, we do need to start the ball rolling. We'll just jump in and out of the comment section for before and during our little chat. So we'll definitely continue covering Irish families and stuff, especially like the Gaelic Resurgence, and at the very start of the Scottish War of Independence is kind of like where we normally start off the 14th century, especially last week when we had the Bruce's invasion of Ireland. If you watched the live stream last week, we were covering how the Bruce came into Ireland, shake things up for sure, shaked it to a point where, especially after the Battle of Dysa O'Dea, we start to see this sort of resurgence of Irish culture starting to bloom in Ireland. And at the same time, you see the likes of the McCarthys, the O'Briens, and perhaps not the O'Neills yet, but you do see a lot of families starting to rise up and start to push against the English the English system in Ireland, especially after that letter to the Pope. I think that letter there is definitely definition, literally by law saying, hey, look, we're not happy by the way we are being governed in Ireland by the English king and how abusive the English king is towards us, the Irish. So even from the perspective of the papacy, even if they are not willing to do anything for us, in this day and age, it tells us today, as academics and historians, so on and so forth, that our ancestors going into the Scottish War of Independence were defining themselves as the Gael, and in fact were very unhappy at their treatment by the English. So that letter to the papacy, very, very important indeed. And in fact, that entire war, the Scottish War of Independence, was very good at giving us our base foundation to identify who we are today as a culture of clans against, I suppose, today seen as the kind of rise of Western culture in many ways. But I suppose we were in many ways the first original Goths and punks, anti-Western culture in many ways. But regardless, that kind of identity, the Irish identity that we have today against the establishment from England that was coming into Ireland back in the 14th century with the Scottish War for Independence that we can see in the film Outlaw King. I don't know if the comment section has seen the movie Outlaw King. I thought it was absolutely brilliant stuff. Let's pop ahead forward. Is there any comments or anything you want to cover there, Michal, before we start pushing forward?
No. Some people have, Miss Claire's mentioned some interesting characters to look up, but I wouldn't know anything about them, so I can't really comment on them for now. I'm sure they might pop up in future. If we continue along this timeline, individuals like that maybe will pop up later on under the Tudor court, more likely under Owen's advice, and he'll probably take more of that lead role. But Miss Claire's also saying about post-plantation 1660, which is way way beyond this. That's the destruction of the Gaelic culture.
I know, right? After we just rebuilt it, the English get involved again, like.
But yeah, so again, we might come into that again if this continues on a normal trajectory of dates. Then I'm sure we'll get to the plantations eventually. But no, I didn't really watch the Outlaw King. I saw the battles, but that was the only thing I was really interested in, was the battles. I wasn't really interested in their interpretation of politics at the time. Maybe I should go back and watch it.
I love that, to be honest with you.
I don't consume enough media outside of literature. So I was, as I was saying to you, I'm about when did Outlaw King come out? Maybe 5-6 years ago?
Yeah. Somewhere around 2016, 2017, somewhere around there.
So I'm about a decade behind when it comes to
a good old historian. That's what you're saying. You're a good historian.
Yeah, I just don't want my mind. Like I actually generally, I'll just divert for 1 second. I generally don't like reading like historical fiction. Because I get so paranoid that I will remember it and then repeat it as fact later on. Like, I don't know where I got this source from, but I heard that the Wizard Earl of Kildare was actually, based on Sauron, and like, vice versa. So I get a bit like, so I stay away from fiction as best I can and just stick to historical fact, just so I don't muddy the waters, because I've ADHD and my brain only allows me a little bit of information at a time. So
it's also very interesting as well. Yeah, I fully agree that they've forgotten their Celtic roots. It's a great point. When I see English people, they look Celtic to me, and totally not at all. Yeah, I fully agree with that one as well. And I also agree with the comments that Caveman is posting up as well. It's very interesting as well if we just take a step back at how the English the Anglo-Saxons defined themselves when the Normans came into England. Of course, there's a lot of dictatorship that happens first and foremost under William the Conqueror as he goes in there, especially in the north of England, and just ravages, like even does an entire scorch earth campaign, kills thousands and thousands and thousands of Anglo-Saxon native people, and then enforces those areas with moat and bailey castles to really hammer, quite literally by the land itself, hammer down his iron fist rule. But then once things start to settle down, especially during the period of King Stephen, the Anglo-Saxons seem to go very anti-dictatorship. And I suppose that's why in many ways the Anglo-Saxons had supported King Stephen against Empress Matilda, because Empress Matilda was solidly into dictatorship. She literally believed that she herself should be the only control and power inside of England. She believed in absolute control, which was completely against the Anglo-Saxons in the early 12th century, because they liked their local Anglo-Saxon councils. That was it. They loved their Anglo-Saxon councils and wanted to keep on to that tradition of having local councils. So I suppose in many ways, although those people in those communities inside of England at the time, well, the realm of England at the time, didn't quite understand race and nationalism as we understand it today, I suppose because they identified themselves with, as silly as it sounds, Anglo-Saxon councils against the English monarchy that was enforcing, from their interpretation, enforcing dictatorship on top of them. I suppose that's why they identify themselves as Anglo-Saxon today, because it's an Anglo-Saxon culture of having local councils and working out locally how everything is going to be run that week. Which, believe it or not, when Henry II takes over, after both his mother has gone to the side and King Stephen has died and passed away, he takes over control of England and a good chunk of France. And because he wants to focus mostly in France, Henry II does, he's more than happy to allow the Anglo-Saxons run their own councils, even if the Anglo-Saxons think this is another form of gaslighting and manipulation from the English monarchy, and keep that paranoia up even more so after the death of Thomas Becket. And yeah, I think that's a very, very good and interesting thing to highlight, especially when we look over to Ireland, who at the time is also trying to define itself with its own individual culture, away from this strange dictatorship that's coming into the island of Ireland, which we define as this very strange kind of English culture coming in.
I'll just quickly, Davey, you're very surprised to see the Tudors were actually Welsh in origin. Not only were they Welsh, they actually filled the English court full of Welshmen. So they were very, very into their Welsh roots. But I'll give you one better, who you might not be aware, who's of Welsh descent, Oliver Cromwell. So he's from, he's of paternal Welsh descent. His great-grandfather or his grandfather, it must have been like, they were from the house of either Dafydd or Gwynedd. The only reason they took the Cromwell surname was from his maternal uncle, who was an earl, I believe. So his mother's brother was an earl, and that's why he adopted the surname Cromwell. So they were actually called, I think it was called McWilliams before, or not McWilliams, Ap Williams before. So I don't think Henry VII can be classed as Welsh. It was his father or grandfather who was the seneschal of, and he was the one that married a widow queen. He was a captain of the guard or seneschal, and he I think he was the Welsh one. So it's either, I think it's his grandfather, Henry VII's grandfather or father, is the Welsh one. Henry VII was, by all accounts, English in culture, although still very much in touch with their Ap Tudor cousins on the Isle of Anglesey, or just off the Isle of Anglesey. They also, most of those have changed their name now to Griffin or Griffiths. So anyone with, I'm not on the screen, anyone with a surname Griffiths or Griffin around the Anglesey area. Oh, throwing stuff about.
And he's wrecked it. He's had enough of
it. I was too far off the seat. It could be associated with the Ap Tudor dynasty, who ruled that area before becoming the Tudors. So I can get my camera back on its stand.
Oh, it's grand. No, I went over and highlighted Michal there, because when you highlight the screen, I don't know what it is. It was Rachel that noticed it. When you go and highlight the screen, suddenly the viewership goes up. And anytime I do it, weirdly enough, anytime I do it, highlight any of us on the screen, by magic, the viewership, you can see the viewership going up. And the moment I pull away from Michal's beautiful face, you can see the viewership jumping back down again. It's very, very strange. But anyway, I just want to pop over to Caveman's comment there, which will definitely bring us back on point again, is the Gaelic Resurgence, the rise of Clan Maguire. And my own clan is established in 1351. Go on.
Not quite. They're established a little bit earlier. Let me just sort my camera. But yeah, Don Carrick Maguire, who dies in 1302. I don't know if that's going to stay. I don't know if it's too close to my microphone now. So Don Carrick Maguire, he dies in 1302. He's the first one to be styled King of Fermanagh. Philip Maguire who died in 1305. I suppose you could say, because he's the one that's known as the King of Lord of the Districts. He's the one that seems to consolidate Fermanagh. But I don't know if you like. It depends on what you want to set the bar at, because obviously Don Carrick is the one that sort of breaks away from O'Donnell. The O'Donnells are the overlords of the Fermanagh. You know, the Maguire sort of family sort of exists there, but the O'Donnells sort of rule over them, and he breaks away, and then the Philip Maguire sort of establishes, they start to lean to more as allies to the O'Neills. So the O'Neills start to become, they try to assert some sort of dominance, but they allow the Maguires a lot of freedom. But this is later on, because Philip Maguire is the one who sort of consolidates Fermanagh. So, and he's also, there's also Cahill Og Maguire, who compiled a lot of the annals as well. In the Maguire court, so he's, I suppose you can sort of in what 14, he died in 1499, somewhere around there. He I suppose you could put that in towards the Gaelic Resurgence as well, because literature is another part of this whole Gaelic Resurgence, revival of Gaelic literature, it becoming more widely used and more written more often, and all the sort of propaganda that comes from it.
Interesting for sure. And just popping off those questions there as well, Miss Claire highlighting the fact that John Dee was Elizabeth's alchemist at the time. Definitely something I have to investigate way into, but I do have to, I've spent this year now, most of my reading has switched from the Vikings over to the 15th century, and then I've been don't get me wrong, I've been tipping away at the old Viking research for sure, because Vikings have been tipping in and out of popularity. Jumping over to the 15th century got super popular this year, and now touching back over to the Norman invasion of Ireland, because of the fact that Normans have become a massive hot topic this year. because of the fact that people are bringing up the fact of 800 years of British occupation, and also on top of that as well, the fact that the French just want to give Ireland money to go and celebrate the Normans, which ultimately annoyed the Irish because of the fact that they see the Normans as British. Sinn Féin want to, very early on, Sinn Féin seemed to want to, some officials seem to want to somewhat boycott it. The problem is you also have historians inside of Sinn Féin that are putting the foot down. They're saying, hey, wait. Actually, the Normans have nothing to do with the British, and that we could still do some form of living history and stuff to celebrate the event, which I fully agree with, by the way. I don't think we should cancel just because, there is connections there to 800 years of the English trying to get involved with Irish politics. I don't think we should not celebrate the Norman invasion of Ireland. In fact, I think we should completely highlight our history for sure, especially if the French are going to pay us to do it. So that whole conversation of the Normans and the whole 11th and 12th century is definitely hot right now. It's something I've been doing a whole load of reading into, which means I haven't been doing as much reading into the Tudors the way I should have. So yeah, the John Dee and his connection to the likes of the wizard, Fitzgerald, definitely very interesting and something I should definitely read up on for sure. Just 1 second there, I can hold drink of my cup.
Miss Claire, obviously, I'm happy to answer your question. We're not ignoring it, but we have a general topic that we're covering, and then we're going to waffle about each sort of specific thing. So we are more than happy to answer your questions, but you just need to just put it in there. If we don't see it the first time, maybe put it in again a wee bit later, but we will try and get to it. But there's no point in sort of just writing away. We're not ignoring it. As you can tell, we're just waffling a bit first. So I'm Philip and I can waffle about this whole topic for ages, and then suddenly we've missed a comment, but we're not doing it on purpose. But I will just say, actually, you're very lucky because your surname does sort of lose power in this time period, so it kind of ties in quite nicely. So in Ulster, Tyrconnell, Donegal, Monday Donegal is one of the leading families. You keep putting it in, it keeps putting me to the other side. Is the Canaan, which gets anglicized to Canon. Now, there are English canons who are unrelated, but I'm going to take it that possibly you're from the Canaan, who are kings of Tyrconnell. Now, they've been there. There's actually an argument whether they actually have the oldest surname in Ireland. At the minute the title is given to the O'Clearys, but there is a strong case that it could be O'Cannon too. But I'll go down that another day. Anyway, they actually fall from power as the O'Donnells rise to power in the 13th century. It's at the expense of the O'Cannons. So as the Gaelic Resurgence is happening, the O'Cannons fall from power. The Kinaloan push further south, but in doing so, they sort of weaken their ancestral homeland of Inishowen and Donegal, and the O'Donnells use that time to expand into Inishowen, basically creating the kingdom that would rule Donegal and Fermanagh. So it's at the expense of the Canaan that the O'Donnells obviously rise to power. So at this time period that we're talking about right now, they're getting their arses handed to them by the O'Donnells. So just to be blunt about it.
What was it called? Caveman brings up a very good point as well with Philip Maguire up in 1360. I just want to highlight, right? So not only do we have the Battle of Dice O'D, which you do have a lot of history. I don't know about you guys in the comment section and Michal and stuff, but you do have a lot of academics and historians that do sort of start the Gaelic Resurgence with the arrival of the Bruce in Ireland. And if not, definitely around 1318, that whole year, because of the fact that you also have the Battle of Dysa O'Dea, when you have the likes of the O'Briens who get that magnificent victory against the Declares. The Declares seen as very English at the time, very much representing the English control in Ireland. But at the same time, the O'Briens also seen as, one of these major factions as part of the Gaelic Resurgence against the English, pushing the English out of it. Although at the time, perhaps maybe the O'Briens were unaware of what they were doing. Also, on top of that as well, just as the Gaelic Resurgence was coming to an end, you also have the death within the family of William de Burgh. And with William de Burgh, you end up having a complete civil war against the de Burgh family, where the de Burgh family end up splitting into 3 factions. Just before we came live today, Michal was definitely expanding on this conversation. I'm going to pick which one is the best between the various branches of the de Burgh family, where you end up having, William de Burgh. One branch is the William de Burgh family, isn't it? And then you have the Clan Mori? And finally, you have the English de Burgh branch as well. And the 3 of them fighting over control of the estates to do with the de Burgh family in a de Burgh civil war that lasts around 1333 to 1338, which is a quite disturbing conflict, especially when you have certain individuals that get locked up in oubliettes and starve to death.
Yeah, Walter de Burgh in Greencastle in a showing. He gets imprisoned by his own kinsman, he starved to death. So that's that was the basic. What a way to go, being who you are. But like I said, the 1333, it begins with the assassination of William de Burgh, known as the Brown Earl, that what follows is a succession crisis, because the William actually left no heirs. He left an infant daughter, Elizabeth, and obviously the English decided to step in here. And it's a massive estate in Ulster and Connacht that William owns. So it's passed on. She's eventually taken to England by her mother, and she's married to Lionel of Antwerp, the son of King Edward III. So you can see that the English crown is trying to muscle in on this and trying to get some control, and because it's probably one of the largest landholding families in Ireland at the time. The junior branch of the de Burghs, the Sirs of the Grey Earl. No, is it the Grey Earl? Or the Grey de Burgh. They obviously reject the claim of the daughter. And they claim that she's an absentee. She's not there to rule. I mean, she's a baby. And they think it's absurd that they have to pay homage to an infant, a young girl. So, so they actually seize lands for themselves. So they're effectively starting a war against the English crown, because this is going against English crown's interests, because they've obviously married Elizabeth to Lionel, or I don't know if they marry her or they've betrothed. But from this, you get the fragmentation, you get the families becoming the McWilliam Eoctor and the McWilliam Oactor, which is the upper McWilliams, who would then become known as the Clan Rickards. So they rule southern Connacht, Galway, stuff like that, and then the lower McWilliams, who are founded by Edmund the Scotsman, and they control Mayo or northwestern Connacht. So and with that, obviously, that feud that lasts the whole Gaelic Resurgence right up until the very end of the Battle of Knockdoe in 1504. So you can really see that's a good couple of hundred years of just feuding, all because of this one incident.
Yeah. Because in my notes, I have them breaking into 3 branches, which is the MacWilliam branch, the Clan Rickard branch, and obviously the original, the Burgh English branch, which obviously ends up getting taken over by, as we pointed out there earlier, Lionel of Antwerp. Who jumps in there and is the one, by the way, that brings in the Statutes of Kilkenny. So you can see why this ends up ultimately pulling everybody into this. And we end up having the famous battles with Art MacMurrough putting off these amazing sieges, and eventually goes in and actually takes the tribute from Dublin. But very much you can see how that escalates from, and why some people would push the start of the Gaelic Resurgence back to the Scottish War of Independence, and then have it start to build up with this civil war here, because this civil war really kind of puts down the foundation to the later Gaelic Resurgence, especially when we get up to Art MacMurrough. And then by the time we get up to 1370, him pulling off these big major sieges in Ireland, where he's sieging some pretty tough, hard-cracking castles. Like some of these castles are absolutely amazing. And to hear about Art MacMurrough and his Gaelic military force being able to successfully siege these very tough castles and capture them away from the English, and then eventually in 1370 march on Dublin and actually take the tribute, as we refer to as the Black Tax, from the English. It's very, very funny that when we look at most of these maps, we always see the map with the Pale. But in many ways, like Art MacMurrough from that period onwards, would have definitely seen that as part of his control in many ways, especially when he takes the tribute away from them, from his interpretation of things. But of course, we're going slightly a bit too forward on that one. Is there anything else you'd want to highlight with the Burgh Civil War as we're getting into the peak of the fighting with the Gaelic Resurgence?
No, I mean, like I said, we know, obviously we've covered why it happened. We've covered some of what's happened in it. There's some very brutal, like if anyone wants to go into it, there's some brutal events like the drowning at Loch Mask in 1338, where Edmund the Scotsman takes the Red Earl's, or the Red de Burgh's son, and drowns him in the Loch Mask. So there's it's a very brutal and very bitter sort of a feud that would sort of, and obviously, like you say, you have the Elizabeth and Lionel sort of faction. They are very pro-English. The Clanrickard, they become sort of eventually start to be more English leaning. Or is it no? The Clanrickard become more Gaelicized. The lower MacWilliams become the Mayo branch become more English leaning, and from that stems more problems because the Burkes become really Gaelicized. In fact, I actually would argue in a large part they become more Gaelicized than the Fitzgeralds. They are brazen about it. They go later on. They go to the Dublin Parliament, and one of the rules is you're not allowed to turn up in Gaelic dress. You have to be in English dress. And so they turn up in English dress and they bow down and they swear homage and they're like, yes, we're Englishmen. The minute they get across the Shannon, there's an English garrison looking across their lands, and they literally just strip down and put on the saffron, the brat, all the Gaelic clothing, and they're just there like straight like that across the Shannon, come at us, we're in our own lands now. And that's effectively, they basically call out Elizabeth I in their own manuscripts. So yeah, it's
it's fascinating, isn't it? Like how the main branches of the Burghs, although at the very start of the Gaelic Resurgence are the most English faction in there, it's very interesting that by the time we get up to the Tudor era, they're the most Gaelic faction in there. That is definitely very interesting for sure,
I think once they fractured, it became they become such a large centralized behind the Brown Earl. They're centralized Connacht, Ulster. They're such a huge family that it makes sense for them to be in the English pocket, because the English are obviously throwing everything at them to keep them sweet, because a rebellion from them would be catastrophic. Whether they would win is that would be irrelevant, but it would divide the island. They are so politically strong. Now, what happens when he dies is the factions fracture. So where you start looking for your allies, well, obviously all the cadet branches have married mostly into Gaelic families. So they then lean into that to get their allies, to secure their positions, to get what they need to make sure, because they've effectively gone against the crown. They've gone against Lionel. They've gone against the crown interests. The crown is wanting Elizabeth to inherit all these territories and it all to go to Lionel. And they've gone, no. So in effect, they're an open rebellion. They are an outright open rebellion. So that is why I think you see them Gaelicized. Obviously, the Mayo Burghs then, as time goes on, probably see that it's more beneficial for them because they're now surrounded on all sides. The Mayo Burghs are in Mayo, which is completely cut off from, but even today it's cut off from the rest of the world. So they need those sort of allies, strong allies. Whereas the Clanricarde, he pretty much runs Galway for, he's able to impart their own impressions in Galway. Galway's a strong hub. It's the only hub on that side of Ireland. It's rich, so they're able maybe to have a bit more freedom than the ones who would eventually turn English.
Oh, for sure. 1 second, I swallowed wrong there. Anyway, regardless, do you guys hear it's like buzzing sound as well, or is it just me? Because I think it's coming from me hot and sawed. Because every once in a while, it just kind of starts to build up from my side, and I just want to.
You.
It could be me just going mad. Yeah, it could be just me going.
No, it's not you. No, it's not you go mad. It's you who makes me move my bloody webcam.
I'm sorry.
Every time you put me on big screen, and then I have to move to the other side of the
here.
room.
It does actually work. Like anytime I do highlight you, it suddenly starts jumping up in numbers, and I'm not sure if that's
because I'm gorgeous.
And I'm not sure if that's just because people literally do find you gorgeous, or if what was it called? The algorithm does actually like it. Because if I was to jump you up to the main screen there, it starts jumping up to 40 and stuff, Michal. It actually works,
it's got to be more to life than being really, really good. Zealand quote there.
What was that? I just want to pop back over the Caveman's latest. I just want to apologize because I ended up skipping a ton of the comments there, just to keep on topic there. But yeah, Caveman has a very good point as well. I can trace my lineage to the line of William the Burgh down, the founder of the Burgh. We break with his daughter who marries Lionel of Antwerp to another ancestor of mine. Very interesting, Caveman, for sure, and definitely within our conversation tonight, especially then when Caveman continues the conversation that I was literally going slightly ahead of me and talking about what's happening with the politics in England at the time with Edward II, who marries a French princess, Isabel, who Caveman is actually descended from. She was the wolf, wasn't she? The wolf of France? Because as I can highlight in this picture here, this is her devastation. So while the Burgh Civil War is happening in Ireland at the time, at the start of the Gaelic Resurgence, poor old England has to see this. Walking down the street of London one day, and you see this guy on a ladder having his entrails cut out of his belly and chucked onto the fire to be cooked, and that smell, that horrible rotten smell, starting to cover the streets of London as you're walking down here. This was actually one of the lovers of Edward II, who was quite loyal to Edward II against Isabel, the she-wolf of France. who at the time was looking to take over control of England away from Edward II. I think at this, just slightly after again, Edward II himself would allegedly get a hot poker up his bum, which, pretty much brings an end to him as well. So even in England at the time, very, very violent and hardcore place to live in for sure. I just having a wee drink of my water.
Gaelic family prison escapes happened a lot, right, from English holdings. I remember hearing stories of some important Gaelic fellows who escaped but lost toes from the frostbite or something. You're talking about Fitzgerald, Burgh, and someone, Hugh O'Donnell. This is the start of the rebellion later on, Tudor conquest of Ireland. It's 15th, 16th century. It didn't happen a lot. I think if you look at statistically, it didn't happen a lot. There are a lot of, great escapes from the Tower of London, from Dublin Castle. That's where that escape happened from. But at the same time, they're only made famous because they are great feats of, resilience, resistance, all these sort of culmination of things coming together where these individuals could escape. But statistically, the amount of people that were held in these places died. it didn't happen. Crannogs were another good place for holding families and, rebellious lords and stuff. And, they normally rely on logistics from allies. These are happening not through great like the Great Escape, where you get a bunch of people and they're thinking of ways to escape. What's happening is these are happening from outside forces with internal spies and stuff like that are infiltrating these places. Not many people had those connections. So really, when you see the individuals who do escape, it's not Joe Bloggs off the street. It's not the minor baron from down the road. These are normally big players in grand schemes. And Fiachra O'Byrne is one of those who's, at the time, is obviously about to be involved in a, they I can't remember if they've just taken it or they tried to take it before or it's afterwards, but they tried to take Dublin Castle. So yeah, so it's very rare, but it sounds like a lot because you see all these names. But if you take into account of the amount of people have been taken prisoner and the gaps in centuries between each individual escaping, it's not as, rich a source as you might think.
For sure. I think Caveman is literally just writing the script for us there because he keeps jumping ahead of what I was about to say. I'm about to say it, and then Caveman just shoves it in there as well. And I'm like, Caveman, you're literally saying, reading my mind. He's literally going into my brain and taking out all the information. Just before Caveman, I jump over to the Statutes of Kilkenny and talk about the fact that the likes of the brat is banned. By the way, the brat is a nice, beautiful Irish cloak. What I might do actually next week is put in a photo of the brat because it is absolutely gorgeous, and it is one of the very things that are banned. It's seen as very Gaelic, as very Irish from an English perspective, from the perspective of Lionel of Antwerp, who appears around 1366. It's seen as very kind of Irish, the brat is, although it's an Irish cloak. It's much more bigger. You can see here Lionel of Antwerp in his own cloak, an English cloak, the kind of cloak you should be wearing. However, the Irish have their own cloak. It is a bigger mantle of a cloak and has big, massive fringes on the side. It would have your traditional pattern, the kind of tartan pattern on it as well. And it was seen as very kind of Gaelic. And just before the kilt and all that sort of stuff is banned as well, it was actually the brat. The brat was the original Gaelic clothing, Celtic clothing, if you want to call it, that was banned by the English at the time. And it starts to become this running theme of, why can't you dress English? Which to the sane Irish people makes absolutely no sense, because the reason why they're wearing brats instead of English cloaks was because the brat was bigger and warmer for a much more colder Irish climate. Especially when you're dealing with the north, especially this week when the Irish have to deal with the storms coming in from the North Atlantic on top of them. Of course, they're going to be wearing bigger and heavier cloaks and mantles to keep themselves warm. Of course, that's Lionel of Antwerp didn't see it that way. Yeah, survival, of course they should. The Irish didn't see the brat or the cloak as Irish nationalism at the time. They definitely didn't see it as a form of nationalism because they didn't have any understanding of it. They seen it as a means of survival, so it was never originally meant to be a form of defiance or rebellion. It became the form of defiance and rebellion, especially going into the periods of the Jacobite and Williamite Wars. But at the time itself, it wasn't. It was seen as a means of survival. It was just the English, especially Lionel of Antwerp right here, who was seen as a complete madman because that's what he was. Anything else you want to add onto that, Michal?
We'll ask you a question, but I'm just going to correct. Dennis has obviously corrected me on. I said an O'Donnell escaped Dublin Castle with, I believe, Fiacre O'Byrne, but it was Art O'Neill. I knew it was an Ulster chief. I flipped a coin in my head, and that's what it landed on. So again, individuals are hard to remember when there's thousands of people to remember. But I will ask you, because I've got a question for you, because clothing is not my area at all.
Yeah.
So I will ask you, when's the brat and mantle, when's the mantle start to get used in Ireland, as in with the lovely fringes, and when's it going from a cloak to what we would consider a mantle?
So, as you know yourself from doing Viking study, at the start of the early medieval period, there's a much more lighter cloak, which is more closer connected to what you can see here with Lionel of Antwerp was wearing. And it's got the famous Irish, Tara brooch, right? So we normally, during the Viking Age, we have the classic, cloak on us. There is talk that there is a fringe on it. I don't have the photo on me today, but I actually have done the fringe, and it's not that heavy. It's just a basic cloak. You fringe it, and then you get yourself a Tara brooch or any brooch, and you can even get pins as well. You don't really need Tara brooch. You can always just get yourself a regular pin, and you just pin it up here. Now, because I liked the likes of the Tara brooches and various other, like the Kilkenny brooch, for example. I like all of them. I have the Kilkenny brooch. It's absolutely gorgeous. I pin my side up here, right? Now, Caveman has an entire theory around the usage of the cloak during the early medieval period as a form of Irish martial art. I always kind of thought and speculated about it as well, but I don't have any solid evidence to actually support that. Maybe Caveman does. However, as we go into the later medieval period, and it's so fascinating as well. I wasn't supposed to highlight who I was actually supposed to highlight myself, but it is interesting that as we go into the late medieval period of the Scottish, literally on cue of the Scottish War of Independence, you actually have the outbreak of a mini ice age. So the temperature starts to drop down, and at the same time, famines start to break out left, right, and centre because of the mixture of a mini ice age that suddenly hits Scotland and Ireland and the constant war because of the Scottish War of Independence. We have famines starting to kick off left, right, and centre. And it's here that creative Contessa Rachel has speculated that it's at this point that you start to see the brat start to pop up in our literature, as you know, because brat ultimately means like cloak and stuff, but you're talking about the mantle brat, the bigger, heavier, shaggier brat, and it does seem to appear at the Scottish War of Independence that may have been the period where we're getting these bigger mantles on top of us to keep us warm during the start of this mini ice age, which makes sense because as we go into the Gaelic Resurgence, it's at that point that we see this resistance from the English, that the Irish, the reason why they're acting so savagely is because they're not behaving and dressing English. That if they dressed more English, they would behave much more civilized, you know, and that seems to be the take, especially when you look into the Statutes of Kilkenny with the likes of Lionel of Antwerp, as pictured above here. Lionel of Antwerp, we speak of him, and suddenly Owen O'Neill has appeared in the comment section there. How are you keeping on?
Fine. Hold on. I'm fine. I'm just trying to log in. 1 second.
Oh no, take your time there. We're just bitching about yourself there, and Lionel. How you actually agree with Lionel of Antwerp and the banning of the brat? It was something you definitely pushed for. You think more of the brats should be banned in Ireland, isn't that right, Owen?
Yeah. Hold on. I'm trying to. Today it's asking for an email address and password. 1 second.
Oh yeah. Take your time.
No worries. Mayo Kerr, thank you very much for the I don't know who it went to, but the £4 the British pound gift there. Thank you very much for the super sticker. I don't know which lucky guy got that today, but thank you.
I think that's yourself, Michal. Squared away there. I think you are. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Give me a new camera stand. I stood on this one, so it only stands at a certain angle. Yeah. I'm actually at a twist at the minute.
Go on there.
Yeah. No, I just was interested in the I would like to say clothing isn't my area of expertise, so it's nice whenever you can just sort of get a picture of not only what's happening with families, but how they're dressed when they're doing it. Some were saying there about Jim O'Neill has a beautiful £5, 100% wool blanket. I was thinking of making a cloak out of it. Do you know, I walk around with a big woolen one as well with a big deer on it. And I do kind of end up, when I'm making a coffee, and I'll be like, I would pretend I'm a senator from ancient Rome, or I'm an Irish Gaelic noble, making a cup of tea. Why not?
Yeah. I would love to make an Irish brat. What I actually should do here, I can quickly grab a hold of it.
What's the best resource to understand Brehon law other than you? I don't actually understand Brehon law that well. I know the families who taught it, who sort of kept it alive, who are associated with it in various degrees. But Brehon Academy, Kevin Flanagan of Brehon Academy, is an excellent source for Brehon law. He is a lawyer himself. We have had great interviews with each other where we would maybe disagree on our interpretation of history and how it applies, but it's all in good faith and all. We're good friends, and so it's. But he's definitely, if you want to know what laws are being stipulated, maybe not just at the time, but have been written about later and possibly been applied, he's definitely a great resource for learning that. But also Celt.ucc. Website as well. That's Celt.ucc. Is a great resource for a lot of medieval manuscripts that have been translated into English.
For sure. The Irish brat. 1 second, I'll just pop in with that comment there. The Irish brats are way better and Gaelic dress was way better in my opinion. Also, Gaelic law system, the Brehon law, which was way better than the English law. Well, I definitely would 100% agree with that one. But also on top of that as well, I could understand why the Irish were so confused at why the likes of Lionel of Antwerp was looking to outlaw the usage of the brat. So that's the brat there. Obviously, you can see the difference between Lionel of Antwerp's cloak, if we could highlight that one as well. So that's Lionel of Antwerp's cloak, the much more English cloak, as it's referred to. And there is the brat that Lionel was looking to ban. And you can see how it's much more bigger, much more heavier. And you can see that fringe inside there as well, which was seen as very kind of Irish, very, very Gaelic at the time. And so in the Statutes of Kilkenny, what was it called? Lionel of Antwerp is looking to ban it. He's looking to remove it because it's seen as very Gaelic in the Statutes of Kilkenny. in 1366. Just popping back into the comment section there. Owen, is there anything else you want to expand on when it comes down to the brat and the banning of it by Lionel of Antwerp going into 1366?
Not really. Just let me. I got a lift back from Castle Island in the fastest ever time ever. So my brain is a bit shaken. So
his brain's still there.
The South Kerry Mountains, the bottom of the McGillicuddy's Reeks at like a very high speed. I need a bit of time to recover. Just give me 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh yeah, take your time there. When it comes down to early Irish law, I would definitely say A Guide to Early Irish Law by Fergus Kelly is an absolutely wonderful book when it comes down to understanding the basics of Brehon law. When it comes down to the study of late Irish law, God, that would definitely be outside of my study as of yet. I do want to get a hold of books that do want to explain into. I have a few books, all right, but I definitely want to delve deeper into the subject of how early Irish law, Brehon law, changes as we go into the later periods, especially with the arrival of, as modern academics and historians refer to them as the Hiberno-Normans, and then later how it works and adapts with the evolution of common law coming into the area and stuff, especially how people are adapting with the likes of the Statutes of Kilkenny and stuff coming into Ireland as well. So it's definitely something I'd love to sit down and do further research and study into. But yeah, if you're first starting off, I would definitely advise starting off with the early medieval period, and Fergus Kelly's Early Irish Law, A Guide to Early Irish Law, is definitely a great place to start for sure. Micheál, is there anything, because you've spent some time as well with Kevin from Brehon Academy, anything else that you'd love to highlight as well, Micheál?
Yeah, I'll just highlight it as well that I will say that Score Corneen is correct, that the Oak Corneens are Brehons or associated with the Brehon law and that sort of stuff in Brefna for the O'Rourke's. So he's corrected with his connection. There are a lot of families that claim it, and again, a lot of our interpretation and our records we have of it, they're coming much later. So we like anything with Irish medieval history, you kind of have to be very wary of what you're interpreting. 18th, 19th century, we all know how the 18th, 19th century really sort of misconstrued our vision of medieval Ireland, and this interpretation of what is happening and how people would would have lived and acted in medieval Ireland. So it's a very I'd say it's almost contentious in the sense that like there are some people that sit on the fence about what was Brehon law. Some people are very strict about it. It was a very single unitary law existing throughout the entire island of Ireland. Everyone followed it, and certainly it's the same way that people think that Tanistry, the succession law, was like a rigid. It happened with every family. When Owen has obviously highlighted many times with the McCarthys, there are many families in Ulster that do the same thing too. A lot of the laws were best case. This is what should be happening, but even laws we have today, not many people really follow them to the letter. And what you can have this interpretation that Brehon law, this is what they would want in an ideal world. This was how things would happen. But did they actually happen? And did everyone follow the letter of the law? Like today, 99% of people don't. I mean, I'm pretty sure if we had speed cameras on every road, there'd be more tickets being handed out than I'd probably have more than my fair share. So yeah, you get the idea though.
No, I for sure. I just want to pop over. Sorry, there.
So if I can come in just about late Brehon law, a very good book is by Hans Paulish. It's called Sir John Davis and the End of Gaelic Ireland, something like that. He deals with an idea called legal imperialism he looks at how the English under James I, in the first decade of the 17th century, went to basically legally bury what was left of Brehon law to do, or basically Irish law to do with property and stuff like that. It's a very interesting book. Another one I would recommend is Catherine Sims from Kings to Warlords, who looks at how Gaelic society changes, especially, say, in the 3 centuries after the arrival of the Anglo-Normans. And then other ones would be to look at some of the detailed histories of the 16th century, like so by Hiram Morgan. What's that guy's name? He's retired. He was a professor in UCG. He's with Nicholas Canny, and some other. I think maybe D.B. Quinn as an older one. But they look at how Gaelic society actually operated, and then also Nichols. It's a bit outdated now. I think it's called Gaelic and Gaelicized Ireland. And all of them will show. Okay, a lot of them won't use the title Brehon law. They'll use other words. But again, some of what people have been saying in the comments is very idealistic, as opposed to what would actually happen. And just to change it, like the problem of any law is enforcing it. Sort of, as Michal was saying, if they're going to people will naturally speed, people will naturally walk through customs. So how do you enforce Gaelic law? And if you're a big lord, who's going to stop you? Someone would mention down there a bit about fines being imposed on the whole clan. That's not really accurate.
Okay. Because I always kind of imagine it, to be honest with you, Owen, I always kind of imagined it worked like that as well. So you're saying there was no way that they could, especially, in this conversation of the 14th century, there was no way for I'm thinking about the English now, trying to find any of these Gaelic clans. There was no way for them to do that, is it?
No, because the English, the idea of a clan, the English hated that idea.
Okay.
Even not clans, like when they are in the 16th century, when they're dealing with the Irish, to say, okay, McCarthy, you're now Earl of Cloncair. And the guy says, yeah, and all these people are my followers. And so therefore they get pardons as well. And the English go, no, they have to get their own pardons individually. The Irish had a very collective point of view. And this is something that's mixed. The English had a very individual one. Each individual is an individual, except when they want to hang a whole pile of people at the same time. The Gaelic lords, I'm the Lord of Tyrone, and therefore everyone in Tyrone, Armagh, and what's now Derry, Fermanagh and Monaghan, they've always been my followers, so therefore I'm responsible for them. Gaelic, I think people miss that thing out. Gaelic law is quite collective. And sort of the way Brehon law would have operated is the Lord would have had a big influence on it. So if there were people doing wrong in your lordship, you could punish them. So it's not a clan as such, it's the Lord enforcing it. Whether the Lord is like a provincial leader like O'Neill, or say a small little guy who rules just one tua, he would enforce it himself. Of course, if I'm a small lord and along comes McCarthy and says, hey, your guys have been raiding, stealing my cattle, I'll have no option. But if the guy says, you have to pay me 1,000 cattle, there you go. I'll have no option but to hand that over.
Yeah, I mean, and there's also, we got as much as it's a community-based society and very communal. At the same time, there are factions within these groups, you know. So you're going to have there's tiers within the sort of clan system, and again, I want to touch it, but then at the same time, Gaelic culture is not static all through history, and you'll have different people applying the law or a variation of the law or a variation of the clan system to what suits their needs at the time. So you can have Ulster operating almost 100 years behind the McCarthys in what we would consider maybe a more modern interpretation of clan system or whatever works for them, being so hemmed in by Norman lords on all sides, and in England, and they're sort of trading with Europe, so they're getting these new ideas, whereas also maybe not. But then it flips on its side, because it like I think it's Hugh O'Neill who's very much, he really leaned. I mean, the man, he was sort of raised in, I think, Dublin under an English family, but he's raised in English, within the English system, but he's
raised in the Pale.
Yeah, he comes out, he's very much into, he leans into like this really old, like almost like me turn around to the Victorian era Gaelic, like propaganda, sort of like going, this is Gaelic Ireland, because it resonates with people, this nostalgia resonates with people. You see it written all through propaganda, all through, you know, the century, basically, a family sort of really leaning back to the good old days. This sort of politics that we see today isn't new, you know, and so families will be changing all the time. So, like I said, the main point is that Gaelic culture, law, succession, the way they operated, it wasn't static. It, you know, it constantly moved, and sometimes it moved back, sometimes it moved forward. It just moved to what was beneficial to the guys who were using it as politics at the time.
Fascinating stuff. I just want to pop back over to the comment section and cover May's question, which actually is in my field of expertise. I'd love to know, I'll put myself there on the center, and I'd love to know what clothes the Irish and Scottish women took to Iceland giving clothes chat. I'll just pop that one off, actually, because that's actually my field of expertise. And that is, what you want to read is Njál Saga and Olaf the Peacock. Okay, Olaf the Peacock and Njál Saga is the two pieces of literature you want to get a hold of. Now, bear in mind that most of the Norse literature, or if you want to call it Hiberno-Scandinavian literature, most of that is not written until around the 12th and 13th century. And as myself and Rachel were saying the other day, you need to bear that in mind. And it's quite funny, because sometimes they'll have a boat battle, and instead of having a boat battle like a group of Vikings, for example, they'll suddenly take out pole arms that didn't exist during the Viking Age. And if they're pulling out pole arms and weapons from the 13th century, then it indicates that maybe some of the clothing doesn't exist. Unless it's, you know, archaeologically found, okay? But on saying that, it does highlight in the story itself, not only does it indicate that the story is much earlier and goes back to the likes of the 9th and 11th century, but also on top of that as well, it gives us an indication into how clothes may have been worn in that period, because, you know, back in the day, my grandfather would have had such and such a thing. They would have worn it back in the day like this. But also on top of that as well, make sure you reinforce that with archaeological finds inside of Ireland. So, for example, in Olaf the Peacock, that story, it talks about an Irish woman, most likely from the Enel dynasty, who's kidnapped and taken to Iceland and sold as a slave in Norway, and she gets pregnant. Now, in that story, it highlights the fact that Hiberno-Scandinavians are dressed differently to the Icelanders. So it highlights the fact that there is difference, and we can see that as well with archaeological finds in Dublin, that they are different and unique to what you would find in Norway and Iceland. So it kind of confirms that even in Ireland, even in Iceland, there is differences in the clothing and dress that the Hiberno-Scandinavians worn, the men of Dublin, had worn in Iceland compared to the regular Icelanders who dress more Norwegian, which, you know, is interesting in itself. So definitely give them a read, and definitely have a look at the archaeological finds in the likes of Dublin and stuff. And from there, I would definitely advise you to pick up the book Patrick F. Wallace's book on his archaeological finds in Dublin. God, the actual name of the book itself now has popped over my head. I'll pick it up later anyway for you.
And you were correct, May. Sorry, it's celt.ucc, the way you spell it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Another point just about clothing is a lot is very region dependent. So if you're like, you may be a noble Irish woman kidnapped from Ulster. You may be in elite Irish clothing. You're brought as a slave to Iceland.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're marrying someone in Iceland. But the clothing you go in, you bring with you, is going to wear out sooner or later.
Yeah, that's true.
And then what you will replace with is local clothing.
Yeah.
And local clothing is often going to depend on the material that's available, what sort of wool, the type of wool, but also what sort of dyes, what sort of colors are available. This is way beyond my expertise. What is available? What would be the differences, say, between Iceland and Norway? But I'm sure there were some.
Yeah, of course. But what's very interesting in the tale, and it's going slightly off of our main topic tonight of the 14th century. We'll pull back in a second here. But what is interesting, though, in the story Olaf the Peacock is the patterns and designs, because the princess who was taken from somewhere around the Dublin area, she's a member of the Enel, one of the Enel princesses who's taken away and sent over, allegedly, and sent over to Iceland. And at first they don't actually realize that she's a princess, but when she's making her own clothing, it's most likely and probably applied that she's probably putting in her own patterns and stuff, which is more of the Enel, and it's highlighted amongst Icelanders, and it's kind of one of the giveaways that she's a princess. And also on top of that as well, when the Icelanders are keeping her, they want to highlight that, hey, look, this is a princess slave. She is of high status. And I think dressing her in that unique clothing definitely gives it away. But on saying that, that's probably just unique to high status prisoners. If you were a peasant in the field, no one's going to care about what you're wearing. They're just going to give you local, slave clothing, and that's that. So I definitely, maybe from that perspective, maybe it depends on the status and stuff and why they're keeping you as a prisoner. Because if you're a prisoner because, you're from a very fancy land, maybe the captives want to, highlight that stuff. But at the same time, as Dr. O'Neill has highlighted there, your clothing is going to wear away and you're going to start taking on the clothing of that area. When it comes down to the topic on this one of the 14th century, because clothing is such an important topic when dealing with the Statutes of Kilkenny, I assume if you're captured by the English unforced, just like poor Joan of Arc at this time in France, you're going to be forced to wear the clothing of your captives. Poor Joan of Arc was forced to wear, as Rachel pointed out last week, the creative Contessa, poor Joan of Arc was forced to wear men's clothing. She could be seen as something that's, unnatural by the English. And I suppose because of the importance of the Statutes of Kilkenny for the likes of Lionel of Antwerp, if you were captured at the time, I suppose you were forced to wear English clothing. Just popping back over here. Oh, right. No, Yuki's come over with my coffee, which is more important. Just getting back. Go on there.
No, someone saying about the English way prefer structure. That's Ireland had its own structure too, but if you're looking at it from, this is the same problem we have when we talk about land ownership and wars and who if any Irish king ruled over Ireland and the systems that we used and all this sort of thing. When we use a English feudalistic model and we say, oh, this is the more structured version, the Irish had a very structured model too, very similar. And Philip has explained on many lives about how we talk about Irish civil wars and these internal fightings, and then literally references the Baron Wars and all the sort of things happening in England at the same time that are conveniently forgotten. Ireland was very structured, and it had laws and rules for each tier of ranking of individual, no different to the rest of medieval Europe. Ireland was not any different from any other part of Europe, had different laws for different things. For like, that's basically the point. So different laws, different things doesn't make it any less structured. Doesn't make it any less civilized. So
yeah, when it comes down to civil fight, as you said there, with civil fighting and stuff, I always do find it. And Dr. Oran O'Neill said the very same thing last week. Every single time you see civil fighting happening in Ireland, tap at the window here, like while the Burgh Civil War is happening in Ireland at the very start of, just after the Scottish War of Independence, and what some historians and academics would say at the start of the Gaelic Resurgence, what's happening in England at the same time? Tap at the window. Like, England is also mutilating itself as well, with fighting between Isabel, the she-wolf of France, and her own husband, Edward II. So England, it's always funny because every single time somebody turns around and says, "Oh, why are the Irish always fighting amongst themselves?" Come on, tap at the window here. Like, what's happening in England at the very same time? It's the medieval period. It's one of the reasons why we love the medieval period, is watching clans and dynasties and various other factions fighting amongst themselves over the title. Sadly, they're not in the level of civilization that we allegedly have today, where we can allegedly vote in and out our own leaders, which prevents a lot of this internal fighting that we see during the medieval period.
Hang on, I just want to stay here. Coco says you've spelt medieval. Yeah, Philip has dyslexia and he's obviously not realised that, and no one else has clocked it.
Where's medieval spelled wrong there?
Under your name.
Under your name. So I just want to say it's not an academic thing. It is generally a medical condition. He's not right in the head.
Got run down by a car too many times, is it?
That's it. Hang on. But anyway, that's we'll just get back to the topic of 14th to 15th.
I was just going to, someone has mentioned about English giving cash to buy land. There are some very interesting dynamics in relation to that, especially in the later period. Gaelic lords discovered that they could mortgage their land to the English, and Gaelic lords were generally very rich in land, because in Ireland there was a lot of land and not many people. So they discovered that they could mortgage it and get money, and then that the English would have great trouble trying to enforce the mortgage. After 1603, this got more serious, and many Gaelic lords who had been doing that all their lives, and their fathers and grandfathers had been doing this, got in trouble and lost a lot of land because of that. But if you look at Donald McCarthy Moore, or the last McCarthy Moore as such, he mortgaged a lot of land to Valentine Brown, whose descendants would become Earls of Kenmare. And then Valentine Brown thought he was going to end up with all the ownership, but McCarthy Moore's daughter, he let his daughter marry secretly Florence McCarthy, who suddenly gets all that land, and burned massively Valentine Brown. And that wasn't the only occasion that happened. So land dynamics are very interesting.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Give us a second there and I'll pop you back out again. Just pop it. I don't want to spend all day talking about early Irish clothing. And I don't want to sound rude either, because of the thing of putting together a list later. I'm just, to be honest with you today, way too busy to be putting together a list for anyone unless I'm actually being paid. Which you can easily pop over to my Patreon. You know, if you are wanting to put together any projects or anything for you, definitely pop over to my Patreon, and I have no problems making time. It's just today, geez, I have way too much going on, And if you definitely want to continue the conversation of clothing, myself and Rachel are setting up another GoFundMe on the 19th, where we plan to put together a project on 15th century clothing in Ireland. Rachel wants to put together clothing for me based on the Desmond Fitzgeralds. So if you're definitely interested in that one, definitely head on over to my channel on the 19th of December, where me and Rachel go into more details about clothing, specifically on the Desmond Fitzgeralds, where I'm actually from, down around the Mallow region. Just popping over as well, just to continue this conversation as well, as we go into, because we've been hopping between the Gaelic Resurgence of 1366 with the Statutes of Kilkenny, but also I want to highlight the fact that the time, while all this is going on, the main focus, I'm still trying to pick the right kind of camera, but anyway, while all this is going on inside of Ireland as well, we also have the 100 Years' War, which kicks off when Edward III manages to scam the Italian banks into giving him a whole load of money that he never actually planned to give back. He never actually planned to give any of that money back over to the Italians. He was always planning on scamming them from the very start, allegedly. So he ends up getting a whole load of money. And with that money, he ends up hiring a lot of mercenaries, and he pretty much reforms the English military into this exceptionally good, powerful military of allegedly 30,000 men, which he brings over to France, which is made up, a good chunk of it is made up of mercenaries, all paid for by the Italian banks. He also reforms his own English military force inside of England into having all mostly longbowmen, because he suddenly finds out during the Scottish War of Independence, led by his own grandfather, Edward I, that the longbow is exceptionally powerful. And so he comes up with using also a mixture of Scottish tactics, comes up with the tactic of having stakes in front of his polearms. He gets a whole load of polearms, puts it in front of his main force, and then have stakes in front of them. And then on the flanks and the sides, he would have his longbowmen. So as the French cavalry would come in, they would be heavily hit by the longbows. And then as they're coming in, they would suddenly go onto the spikes itself. And then the English polearms would come in and finish off the poor French knights, and then they would slowly but surely hack them up. This gives Edward III a humongous advantage, and before long, he's slowly but surely eating up all of the territories and land. While that is also happening as well, and we end up getting a conclusion between the civil fighting that happens between the Burghs inside of Ireland, which ends up seeing them divided into a kind of division, with the Burgh, the main line of the Burghs taking over Ulster in the north of Ireland. As you can see there, that's the north of Ireland. In blue is the territory that the Burghs are left with. And then
it's not showing on my screen.
Oh, it's not showing the photos?
The last one I saw was the king, and then that was it.
Oh, I don't know. Owen, can you see that picture there of
yeah, map, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't see it. Oh,
which screen are you looking at?
Oh, the chat screen, the restream.
Oh, live. Yeah. It's probably not catched up yet, perhaps. Right. I don't know.
Maybe no, I'm watching live. No, I'm watching our group.
Just a sec. I'll check there.
If it's working for everyone else, fine. That's fine.
Let's check there, just in case, because it could be acting up on the main one as well. Regardless, what happens there on the Irish side of things is that the Burgh, the main line of the Burghs that Michal had highlighted before, they're just left with the Ulster in blue, the Carrickfergus area. And then you have on the Connacht side, that gets broken up as well into two branches of the Burghs, which is the William the Burgh family and also the Clanrick. That's the one.
MacWilliams, but it's MacWilliam Eachtar and the MacWilliam Uachtar. But yeah, you get the Clanrick or to differentiate the two.
Mm. And while all that is going on as well, we also have the rise of the Fitzgeralds, which allegedly, according to the Butlers, are pushing. Allegedly, according to the Butlers, and I do highlight that, according to the Butlers, pushing to become the High Kings of Ireland, especially when the Fitzgeralds marry into the O'Brien family, which is very, very questionable from an English perspective. Regardless, it ends up Maurice Fitzgerald, the first Earl of Desmond, starts up his own little kind of Gaelic push at that point, especially then when his son ends up taking over. Garold Fitzgerald, the poet Fitzgerald, takes over afterwards, and he definitely pushes out this massive kind of Gaelic push, all right, especially when he starts constructing a whole load of Gaelic literature from his castle over in Kerry and stuff. So definitely, even in the Fitzgerald territories, we can see that massive kind of Gaelic push. And it's very interesting that, and maybe Owen O'Neill will kind of disagree with this, perhaps. I don't know if you'll agree or disagree with this, but this is the point where you start to see much more earlier academics turn around and say this is the point where you start to see the likes of the Fitzgeralds become more Irish than the Irish themselves. It's definitely, especially from our own perspective today, very, very complicated statement to make. That the likes of the Desmond Fitzgeralds have become more Irish than the Irish themselves. Michal and Owen, what's your perspective of that? That the Fitzgeralds and I don't know about the Butlers at this point, but definitely the Desmond Fitzgeralds have become more Irish than the Irish themselves.
First, can I just show you my calendar?
Yeah.
I got this today. I had to go up to Castle Island, the Castle Island Castle.
Oh, wow.
That doesn't exist. That's a reconstruction.
That's gorgeous, isn't
it? It was their biggest castle. And there's a nice picture of their coat of arms.
Want that. How the hell do I get a hold of that?
I went into Super Value.
Super Value? No way.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. I'll send you money for that one. Jesus Christ. How do I get a hold of that? That's gorgeous. Can you take the photo? Can you take photos of that one?
Yeah, I bought it tonight. Just like driving my daughter up for football training.
Jesus
I
Christ.
may well be up, and I get a couple more.
Yeah.
They have an interesting. They have a history group there, Castle of the Island, because there's nothing left of the castle. It was the biggest, and there's three little broken bits, and they're hidden away. But in relation to more Irish than the Irish themselves, yes and no.
Okay.
The Desmonds and the Burghs, the Burghers would have been the most Gaelicized, but they still, leaving aside the Burghs, the Burghers, the Desmond Fitzgerald still saw themselves as English. Most importantly, they practiced primogeniture. And there are a couple of times, like the second last Earl, he got rid of his first wife, so he disinherited his first son, using some legal shenanigans. But they follow that, which is why when Hugh O'Neill in the 9 Years' War, he takes the eldest son or the grandson of the second last Earl and makes him Earl. He's called the Sugan, the Rope Earl, because he was not really an Earl. Like, you don't have Gaelic lords creating Earls. That's what Hugh O'Neill did. They were far from Dublin. They were far from the Pale. So, and most of the people they were over, well, at least away from the towns in Cork and etc., would have been Gaelic peasants. But they still, so they would know how to interact. It was a march area. They would know how to interact with Gaelic people. They would know how to interact with English people. But they were English. They saw themselves as English.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because I was talking to Dr. Lisha Shields about it at the same time though, because of the fact that they were like, for me, in my interpretation, I definitely do highlight that they were Anglo. I know it's a modern word, but I do like to highlight that word, which is Anglo-Irish, which I see Professor um, Edward Curtis down in University College of Cork highlight all the time, that there were people that were kind of in between, because I know over in University Galway, Nicholas, is it Nicholas? The famous academic who always highlights that the Fitzgeralds were English. Cannon, that's the one.
Canny.
Yeah, yeah. He's notoriously famous for highlighting them, even from, like, you know, as it's been described like multiple times, he's kind of like the only one in the trenches running against the machine gun, highlighting that the Fitzgeralds were very, very English, from my interpretation of reading his literature. But at the same time, Professor Edward Curtis has always highlighted that that the Fitzgeralds were more kind of Anglo-Irish, that they were between the two worlds. And I suppose because Edward Curtis was my professor, that was kind of the interpretation I always had. And I was reinforced with that, especially this week when I was talking to Dr. Melissa Shields on our live stream. And she was highlighting the fact that the Desmond Fitzgeralds were still speaking Irish. Like, they had to get translators over to the Desmond Fitzgeralds to be able to communicate with them. And also on top of that as well, it doesn't, what was it called? Help, especially with the fact that a lot of the Desmond Fitzgeralds at this point are dressing very, very Gaelic. But at the same time, we can't ignore their interactions with the English court. They're definitely a family, from my perspective, that are not just living the Irish life, but at the same time, they're still very much a part of the English court. As I said there earlier, much more later on, you do have the likes of James the Usurper Fitzgerald, who is going in, like, they're fighting Talbot, and a lot of people would see that as a very kind of Irish versus English feud. But at the same time, when Talbot is in France fighting Joan of Arc, what does Seamus the White Earl Butler and James the Usurper Fitzgerald do? They go on a holiday over to England, which highlights the fact that they're not like cut off from England whatsoever. And as Dr. Melissa Shields highlighted this week, when I was doing a live stream with her, you have also women of the Fitzgeralds who were fully connected in what was it called? The courts of England, especially later on with the Tudor court. So they're definitely people who are between both the Gaelic world and the English world. So I do find the term Anglo-Irish fitting for the Fitzgeralds, that at this point they're pretty much Irish, but they're still, compared to the likes of the O'Neills and the O'Donnells, very much connected in the English court. And as Professor Edward Curtis has highlighted, you have the heads of the Desmond Fitzgeralds and the Kildare Fitzgeralds getting their main heads to marry English women. I know the rest of the family are marrying Gaelic people, so they're still part of the Gaelic world. But at the same time, the heads of these families are marrying English women. So they are, in my interpretation, very much a part of the Anglo-Irish world.
Yeah, definitely. Just one thing, I would say all the Fitzgeralds would have been English speaking and Irish speaking. They all knew English. They all knew English. Some probably would have known French as well, and maybe a bit of Latin. They would have received a similar education to the family of York, the family of the Northumberland, the people who the Percys from Northumberland. They would have received the same education as the Desmonds. You could say they were. I think I know Old English and Anglo-Irish weren't used at the time, but one thing that was used was the English-Irish. And again, just to go back to the points I made previously, there was no Irish word for Irish at that stage. So the Irish saw them as sort of English but living in this land.
Yeah.
And they, like, you can go to the border with Wales, and you'll find plenty of English families, lordly families there, who can speak Welsh, and they are not sure of what Welsh costume clothing would have been in the 14th, 15th, 16th century. Was it different from the English? But you would have had families who could cross the border and who could interact with both societies. And the same, like in Scotland, the rise of the Campbells, they start interacting with the Gaelic Scottish. They come from the Gaelic Scottish world, but they're able to move freely inside the non-Gaelic Scottish world, the English-speaking Scottish world. So there's a lot of elite families able to do that.
Yeah, it is very, very interesting for sure. Also on top of that as well, just one thing off. Oh, okay. Actually, I'll say this one first. Which camera do you actually prefer? Because so many people are asking for this camera here. I'm assuming you guys prefer this one here, and you can see that with the viewership, because anytime I switch over to Owen's beautiful face, the views do go up, right? So we can't deny that Owen is not beautiful, especially when the ratings say so. Okay, so if you guys prefer this camera, definitely give me the heads up there, and I have absolutely no problems highlighting what was it called, this camera for sure. Especially if you guys are asking for it both in the comment section and the way that the viewership is suddenly shooting up. I know at times it can actually quite annoy Mihal, because a few times, all right, when I'm doing it, I'll suddenly shoot up to Mihal there, and although the views do go up, it is very annoying for Mihal, who's trying. He's in the middle of his speech, and I'll suddenly switch to this one. The views go up, but at the same time, Mihal gets very distracted while he's in the middle of one of his speeches. And so I'm very wary about that as well. But yeah, definitely in the comment section there, if you prefer this camera, definitely comment below. Or if you prefer this one, the multiple one, definitely give us if you prefer the singular one, this one, which is the singular one, or you prefer the multi one, definitely comment below, because I kind of need this feedback, especially when the ratings are jumping up the way they are, because anytime I jump over to the singular comment one, geez, the views, I'm watching the views here on the multi-stream, and it just sparks up. It's absolutely amazing stuff. But at the same time, I love showing off pictures and stuff as well. So I might still switch between the two, but definitely give us feedback on what was it called, which one is the best, because I definitely want to continue promoting this stuff. Just heading back over to Dr. Owen O'Neill, I got a question. Oh, sorry, a thing there. Could you show off the calendar once again? And where did you get the calendar? He said Super Value. No.
Garvey's Super Value in Castle Island. It is by, hold on, the Castle of the Island. That's the history group. If you
it's
Google,
on the screen. Put it to long form. Philip.
I can't. You can't put it on once it's locked into this version. You can't really put it on to long form. We'll take pictures of it later. Definitely take pictures, because that is absolutely amazing. It blows me away.
Those are the pictures. See, a lot of the pictures are of reconstructions, and then there's local castles. If you Google the Castle of the Island history, you'll find it. Hold on. Yeah, on Facebook, it's the Castle of the Island, and then you have www.castleislandcastle.com. And the guy's name is Robert Maguire. Sort of
Caveman's interested.
Yeah, but Maguire spelled funny, MC Guire.
All right.
So he's a local historian who's kind of rediscovered the history of the castle, because Castle Island in Irish is Ilan Kerry, the island of Kerry, and the English used to call it that as well. Sort of, it's Tralee grew, although Tralee is a medieval town, it grew in importance massively from the 17th century onwards, and Castle Island got destroyed a few times too many, and declined in importance. But I'll get some pictures for next time.
Oh, 100%, because God, that's absolutely gorgeous. As long as we make sure to reference it, because I definitely want people to go and buy that calendar and really support that, because God, I'd love to see more of that. And if anybody wants to buy it and pick up one for me, definitely do so, because God, I'd love to pick up that one as well. It's absolutely gorgeous. And perhaps pick up one for Michal as well. Just heading over to Jim's comment there. It doesn't look like Michal prefers it that much. I'll shoot off to Michal again. Absolutely beautiful fella. But you can't. I can't disagree with it, because every single time I highlight our faces, even Owen O'Neill, just as he was talking away there, the views are popping up like there's no tomorrow. So it is working. And then when we switch over to this again, it kind of looms around the 20. So, it is working, like, for sure. What else do we have? All the native English nobles were replaced after Hastings. So from 1089, the whole country was ruled by French nobles, making the native Anglo-Irish serfs. Sorry, Michal, we were saying there.
The 99%, but not all. There's Swintons claim descent, the Berkeleys claim descent from paternal. The Howards may have claim it as well in part. Who else? There's another family. I think the Swintons are actually Scottish, from the Scottish borderland areas. There are a few others that just sort of claim it as well, that may have it in there. The Anglo-Saxon records of, are very sparse at best, especially when it comes to, we don't know the relations of individuals during that time period in England. Who is, is he the son of this individual? Is he just as a brother-in-law? Is he, so there's a little bit of gray area for the first sort of, a couple of years of Norman rule. But some families still certainly claim that paternal lineage. The Berkeleys Berkeleys and Howards are probably the most prominent families that would remain. Berkeley still own the castle that they owned back then anyway. But certainly these families came from lower middle class ruling nobility rather than the higher echelons. So they're related to the royal families, stuff like that. And they came from more mid-level nobility, but they were reduced heavily in status, and obviously all the earldoms. And there's it's only something like it's literally single digits the amount of families that would become like the Earls of England from the Norman conquest, and many other families who claim heritage from Norman knights who came across in 1066 are fabrications as well too. A lot of the families didn't have heirs in the male line, and many more got lost through history, so we don't actually know all the individuals who fought at the Battle of Hastings and then went on to have progeny. So
for sure. And getting back on topic as well, Davy Jones sliding it back on topic again with the Black Debt. I 100% agree, especially on the topic we were just talking about, how allegedly the Fitzgeralds were becoming more Irish than the Irish themselves, especially from the period of Maurice Fitzgerald, the first Earl of Desmond. We do start to see that Gaelicization of the group of people I was referring to as the Anglo-Irish. And the Black Debt coming in definitely kind of reinforced that, how a lot of these areas, such as Dublin, Cork, Waterford, Limerick, and a lot of areas that were controlled by, quote unquote, the Hiberno-Normans. A lot of those people who were originally kind of English levies and stuff. Sorry, kind of English quote unquote peasants, serfs, as people refer to them as well. A lot of them have to be replaced, and the people replacing them, from my interpretation of the literature, is the Gaelic. You know, it's native Gaelic people that are replacing the English in a lot of those territories and stuff. And that's after the Black Death. The Black Death comes in and it hits very, very heavy those English areas because they're very, very built up, from my interpretation. And then more of the countryside areas. Now, I'm not saying, you know, areas like the O'Connors, the O'Neills aren't hit, but at the same time, they don't appear to be as heavily hit as those built up areas controlled by the English at the time. So what happens is that a lot of Gaelic seem to go into those areas and take up those jobs, which helps Gaelicize a lot of those quote unquote Hiberno-Norman areas at the time. So I definitely agree with what David Jones says. However, David Jones then, and this is a part I do kind of disagree with you there, the Battle of Turles, I don't really put it, if you're talking about the one that happens, maybe there's one I don't know about, but if you're talking about the one that happens in 1174, I definitely disagree with that one. I don't really consider the Battle of Turles as part of the Gaelic Resurgence. Do you guys consider it as part of the Gaelic Resurgence?
It's a little bit early, although it is a turning point in Norman and Gaelic. You know, it's one of the early victories of Gaelic forces, combined Gaelic forces against the Normans. It doesn't stop anything in the grand scheme of things. You know, the Normans regroup, the Irish still end up where they end up. You know, the Gaelic Resurgence, you see a long, meaningful impact over several centuries. The Battle of Turles doesn't really have that long, meaningful impact, in my opinion, for it to be considered part of this. And it's too early, as I said. So,
yeah,
sure.
I agree. I think it's too early. And the Gaelic Resurgence, as you've both said, it's something that took quite a while. Sometimes you have to kind of push aside battles. So a battle is something quick. Certain people fight, certain people die, certain people win, whatever. But this resurgence was something long-term and stronger. Like from, say, the 14th or 15th century to the 16th, early 17th century, Gaelic-speaking peasants, especially in the Pale, increased quite a lot. So that the Pale falls back, the English rule falls back. So you're essentially left with the Pale, a few marcher lords, especially like in Meath, on the border of Cavan, Westmeath. You have the three big lordships, Kildare, Desmond, and Butler, and then you have like minor lordships, Fitzmaurice, Savages, other ones around the place, and the towns, and that's something that took this balance that emerged, took a couple of 100 years to emerge. So it's not something that came out of a battle. It's something that came out of a long series of events, much of which were very slow and were very boring. But if you think of it, like the first big rush of the Normans, they come in, they start winning battles everywhere. Then they're pushed back, but they still rule most of Ireland. And then over a century or so, they start getting like the Black Death comes, etc. And the English lordship in the English kingdom in Ireland is severely weakened.
Aye, for sure.
Well, another part of it as well, you got to remember, and you've kind of touched on it, but a lot of the English nobility or Norman nobility are absentee landlords in effect, because they've been taken away for the 100 Years' War. So a lot of these sort of encroachments that are happening, and all these families consolidating wealth and power and moving into Norman lordships, it's happening. It's not happening under their watch. Effectively, it's they're coming back to it after being away campaigning, etc. So they're kind of on the back foot a wee bit for a lot of it. But it is a lot of it like instead a lot of it's boring. It's cultural. It's just this adoption of families just being absorbed by Irish culture and then sort of leaning towards that sort of side of politics, because again most of medieval Ireland and Europe relies on what can my lord protect me? If he can't, then this lord can protect me. Well, the Gaelic lords are gaining power, the English lords are away in the 100 Years' War. Do you know what? I'm going to become now Sean Og instead of John of wherever. So and I'm going to go and align myself with the O'Briens.
Well, I think if we went back to the original conversation we had at the start, and you see that what's it called, the civil war that kicked off with the Burghs, how quickly the Connacht, the western branch of, if you pop over to this map here, over in Connacht, how quickly the western branch of the Burghs suddenly became very, very Gaelicized very, very quickly compared to the Ulster branch. Now, as you popped up, said there as well, Micheál, is that even the Ulster branch starts to become very, very Irish as well. It's very interesting that it depends what is happening politically and the relationship between these dynasties and the English monarchy. Then it seems to me that when they don't get their way or have an ultimate agenda like the Fitzgeralds, then they suddenly become, as we were saying, they're more Irish than the Irish themselves. Ultimately, it depends on what's happening politically. And this isn't just, we always view this as a very kind of Hiberno-Norman thing. Not forgetting, as Owen O'Neill has pointed out last week, we also have the likes of the McCarthys and the O'Briens that also play the English monarchy as well, and even become very, very, very English. Even our live stream this week, when we were looking into the armor of the O'Briens, we suddenly seen how English the O'Briens were coming, getting very, very quickly, especially going into the William Knight and Jacobite wars. So from my opinion, sometimes it depends what's happening politically, could be the reason why you suddenly see certain members becoming, as we were saying there, very, very more Irish than the Irish themselves, suddenly going from the Burgh to Oberg or something on those lines,
What sort of map? Hold on a second.
This is just a map to highlight Connacht. Don't get too excited.
In what map does Cork reach the Shannon Estuary?
Capital of Ireland. Capital of Ireland.
I will just say, someone said, and it's along this discussion. Yeah, I understand that. But I think they would still hold on to some sort of their identity. As an individual, possibly, which is why we're saying this is an extended period. So I changed my name and I changed my allegiance, and I marry an Irish woman, and I slowly start to, my English clothes that I was wearing, they wear out. My Irish wife makes me a brat, starts to go like that way. But the thing is, I'm rearing my children. My children are being reared by my wife. They're being reared within the clan system, within her family network. They become Irish. Then the next generation, this is the gradual process we're on about. And this is why the Gaelic Resurgence, when you talk about it, you're talking 1350 to 1500. It's a gradual thing. So yes, as a Sean Og, as I said earlier, who was originally John of Leicester, I would probably in some capacity retain this English identity, but it gets watered down. It's almost like you as an Irish American should really understand this, because your cultural sort of what you identify as culturally Irish, maybe quite possibly, isn't really what we are like here in Ireland still to this day. There's a gap, and you're not just you, Jim, but individuals like yourself actively trying to hold on to that Irish identity. But the this imaginary shorn oak is not holding on to it because it's not to his benefit to hold on to it. He's not living in the English-speaking world. He's not living under English protection, so he's not trying to retain it. So that gap widens even more from the what would be considered an Irish American today, as my example.
Just a warning to the comment section. If I was to put Dr. Owen O'Neill get him to do a live stream of playing him a video game of any Irish medieval video game, I think he would have a heart attack and die, to be quite honest with you. I have the comment section there requesting that you play Crusader Kings. And I think if you were to play Crusader Kings, oh, Jesus Christ, I think you'd die. I think you would literally just keel over with a heart attack with the complete abuse.
No, I just saw the map and I said, hold on, Cork. And I noticed, because I saw Kira there earlier, there didn't seem to be a Mayo on that map. And the Pale was going deep into Ulster. Sligo is massive.
Well, to be honest with you, I just kind of wanted to quickly highlight Connacht for the Burgh Civil War. And this is the map that they're actually using in Crusader Kings to depict the Burgh Civil War. So I was just like, well, we could quickly use that. It was just an hour ago. I was just like to myself, oh, I'll just chuck that in there. I wasn't really thinking too much about Cork's sudden expansion. I didn't even notice that Cork had taken over the place. I swear, as a Cork man, I didn't do that intentionally.
Then if you look at Desmu and Kerry, it's eating a huge amount of Cork. I think that map is designed to cause fights in Ireland.
But to be honest with you, Owen, when it comes down to Crusader Kings and their depiction of Ireland, I think you're down to dying of a heart attack even before, because it's meant to be a game that's more based on the political side and the family side of things. However, Crusader Kings has never been able to understand king groups in Ireland. Like their brains, they always try to approach Ireland from a very English interpretation. And then a lot of followers of Crusader Kings, when I read their comments, they're very much like, well, why can't the Irish be English? And I'm like, because none of these regions are centralized. So yeah, I can already see Dr. Owen O'Neill having a heart attack. So we'll quickly move that map on. We'll put up a nice picture there. There you go. Anyway, what was my original? Where was I pushing this conversation next before I end up almost killing Dr. Owen O'Neill live on stream as well? Oh yes.
Think of the views.
Yeah, well, at least we're getting the viewership did go up, in fairness, while Dr. O'Neill was starting to have a heart attack. I was starting to move because we were talking about because of between the Black Death and these various lower barons such as the Fitzgeralds and the Burghs were starting to become quote unquote more Irish than the Irish themselves. Eventually, Lionel Vantuop, who gets involved with the Burgh Civil War as well, he brings in the Statutes of Kilkenny in 1366. And what they are is a whole load of laws that are enforced in Ireland, which are meant to kind of divide and pull away the likes of the Burghs and the Fitzgeralds away from Gaelic Ireland and start making them be English again. Stop dressing Irish, stop dressing like this, as we can see here in this picture here. This is exactly the kind of dress that Lionel Vantuop was completely against in 1366 when he brought those laws out. And furthermore, he wanted to stop the likes of the Burghs and the Fitzgeralds from playing Irish games, from speaking the language, from even getting onto hobler horses and riding these horses like the Irish, with no stirrups on, because the Irish could just hop on and off of a horse, and they were trained to do so because they were very much involved with the cattle raiding culture at the time. From my understanding as well, I don't think Lionel Vantuop had seen cattle raiding, and I think if he did, he'd probably have a heart attack, to be honest with you. But the laws seem to be very, very anti, galloping around with no stirrups on, galloping around more like an Englishman on an English horse with English stirrups on. That's the kind of Ireland, Lionel of Antwerp wanted to see. He didn't want this Gaelic Ireland whatsoever. However, it does not work the way that Lionel of Antwerp thought it would work. And what we end up having is the Gaelic, not just the Gaelic pushing over and retaking all this territory, but we also start to see a lot of these characters, such as the Fitzgeralds and the Burghs, kind of going very kind of independent, semi-independentious, away from the English crown in many ways, I suppose, and start doing their own thing. They're kind of in a very, very funny situation. Is there any way that we can kind of expand on that thought? Ooh, but that's me. Hall jumped out the window. He's had enough of it.
just one point about the Statutes of Kilkenny. You alluded to it. They're not aimed at the Gaelic Irish. They're aimed at the English in Ireland, the Anglo-Irish, the Old English, because the Gaelic Irish are the king's enemies. Yeah. They're officially the king's enemies until the 1530s, when Henry VIII is made King of Ireland. Under that act in I think it could be it's 1534 or 1531. Everybody in Ireland is made a subject of Henry. Before that, it was divided between the subjects and the king's enemies. The Gaelic Irish were officially enemies. They were outside the law as such. They weren't protected in a lot of instances by Irish law. Of course, there's a huge interaction. There's trade, there's marriage, etc., labor, but the Gaelic Irish are excluded. So and another point, I think it was a slip of the tongue. You said the Statutes of Kilkenny were enforced. To me, they weren't enforced. They were enacted, and they were a complete failure.
Yeah,
they didn't manage to stop the Gaelicization of many English, which was something out of necessity, because these English families were in a Gaelic world. Yes, they, like Butler, Desmond, Kildare, they were very powerful, but if they went out to pick up the newspaper and some milk and sausages, they'd have to ask for them in Irish.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, for sure. Now I've got the weirdest image in my head of the local boys going down to your local shop to pick up that calendar there, for sure. What was it called? But then it brings us into this kind of strange situation as well, because I do fully agree that it was like Lionel of Antwerp's intention was not. And by the way, at this point now, when we go up to 1370 and stuff, Lionel of Antwerp ends up getting himself poisoned. He ends up making way too many enemies, never mind in Ireland, but also overseas as well. And they end up poisoning him, get rid of him. But it's interesting in the fact that, and this is definitely another conclusion that we can see with, I'm looking at his book here, but I can't see his name, is the book Richard II and the Irish Kings. And in that book, it does also highlight exactly...
Darren McGettigan?
That's exactly it. That's the book. And in that book, it highlights exactly what you said there, that the original intention was not against the Gaelic Irish. But it's funny, after the death of Lionel of Antwerp, and as we get into Art MacMorra Cavanagh's Gaelic Resurgence from 1370 to 1420, it's interesting that he was very affected by it, because of the fact that he did marry an English woman. Her name literally just on the side of my head. It'll come back later. But he did marry an English woman. And it does very much annoy Richard III, because of the fact that he's now taking, because of inheritance, her inheritance is now taking away land from the English legally as well in many ways. And so it's very funny that Lionel of Antwerp brings in these laws to try to enforce it onto the English, fails to do so, but it still kind of trips over a man who's meant to be outside of the Gaelic world, which then causes Richard III, not just once, but twice, to try to invade and push Art MacMorra out of, lordship of Ireland in Leinster, to try to push him onto, the lands of the likes of the O'Neills and the O'Connors. That is very, very, very interesting. And in fact, it leads to Art MacMurrough then having multiple successful campaigns. No, don't get me wrong. Richard III is very successful in his first campaign in Ireland. Okay, so I'm not saying that, Art MacMurrough Covenant's completely successful. Richard II. Punish myself there. Yeah, you're right. Richard II, who comes in and first time around, successfully beats Art MacMurrough Covenant. The second time around, he's completely wiped out of it. His campaign in 1399 is completely hammered by Art MacMurrough Covenant. And Art MacMurrough Covenant does win a series of massive victories, even goes in and sieges important English castles and captures them from the English. And then in 1370, goes up to Dublin and actually takes the Black Rent from the men in Dublin at the time, from the Pale, which is also very, very interesting, very important in itself. Is there anything else you guys want to elaborate on when it comes down to the massive topic that is Art MacMurrough Covenant?
Okay, I wanted to talk about Richard II. Because as far as I know, after Richard II, the next English monarch who comes to Ireland is James II. When the English would say he's no longer monarch, the Irish would say he is, and then William III. So Richard II, he comes home from Ireland the last time and he gets booted out. He gets deposed. And this creates a kind of shock, a long-term shock in English ruling circles about do not get bogged down in Ireland. No other king goes, or queen, in part because then they're bogged down with the War of the Roses. But Philip II in Spain is facing this big, huge revolt in the Low Countries, Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg. He saves what's now Belgium and Luxembourg by creating a royal court. Marrying his sister and her husband are sent as sort of sovereigns to Brussels, and they create a court. If Elizabeth had done something similar, or Henry VIII, if they had gone to Dublin, even for a while, they could have had a big impact. But one of the reasons they don't is the lesson of Richard II. They're kind of scared. They're just like an English king going to Ireland is bad news for that English king in England. It's this long-term shock that it takes, that it's only at the end, the end of the early modern period has got over, and like William comes to Ireland to fight James, to fight for the crown. And then I think the next king to visit, or it's actually a queen, I think it's the next one who comes is Victoria. I think that's it.
Yeah, you're right there. Like, okay, I suppose after the whole Gaelic Resurgence, and we end up having Art MacMurrough Covenant poisoned in New Ross in 1420. After that, where is he? Jim O'Neill highlights, is there any point where we start to see peace and calm starting to come down? I would say that compared to the violence that we had seen during the period of Art MacMurrough Covenant's push in Leinster, and that whole Gaelic Resurgence push between 1370 to 1420, I think once James the Usurper Fitzgerald, I'll push up another slide there, takes over between Seamus the White Earl Butler, with Seamus the White Earl Butler controlling the Irish Parliament as Lord Deputy of Ireland, I think there's a level of relaxing down. Now, don't get me wrong, I still see a level of skirmishing, cattle raiding, and fighting between the English to a certain degree, between Seamus, the White Earl Butler, and Tolbert. So I wouldn't say it's 100%, life is great in Ireland. especially between 1444, where things are somewhat calmed down to a certain degree. So that would be definitely my thing to what Jim O'Neill was saying earlier. Is there any point where this starts to calm down and relax? And I think the main reason for that is because the main attention then turns back over to France again, So the main fighting itself is kind of mostly focused on France, especially between Tolbert and Joan of Arc. But at the same time, you definitely see the Irish, well, the members of James the Usurper Fitzgerald and Seamus the White Earl Butler still going between. It's not like they're suddenly just click the fingers and they're becoming more Irish than the Irish themselves. They're kind of going between the two worlds in itself, and eventually even Butler goes back in bed with the English again against James the Usurper Fitzgerald. So it still seems to be very, very complicated even in that era.
Yeah,
I have nothing else to expand on there.
No, I mean, you see a lot of Gaelic families obviously starting to carry on the same way they've carried on before. It doesn't really change local politics. That stays quite continuous and quite aggressive. The O'Donnells, like I said earlier, the O'Donnells have sort of pushed into Nishowen. The O'Neills had sort of taken control a century before the start of the Gaelic Resurgence. They're pushing south. A lot of families sort of lose power, so they start to try and sort of regain it again. So it doesn't really change on a local level, but if you want to refer to on a national level, I definitely see it, calming, a status quo rather than a calming. Just back to the status quo of small land disputes and cattle raiding and stuff like that. So
yeah, you could also say that nowhere in Europe was really peaceful before the end of the 17th century or the 18th century, because everywhere you have low-level conflicts between aristocrats, between nobles, or between important nobles and the crown. Like in the 1640s, you have the Fronde, which is a series of rebellions in France of nobles against the king. It's only at the end of the 17th, 18th century that you have strong states that are able to impose some sort of control and stop this fighting. Like there would have been, since the emergence of the Gaelic culture and its destruction in 1603, there would have been constant fighting among elites. But how, like cattle raiding and such, or minor battles, how much of that affected the peasants in the field? Because these people doing the cattle raiding, they didn't really. The peasants in the field were doing important jobs.
Yeah,
they were growing the food to feed the guys who could do cattle raiding and fighting against each other. It wasn't a very destructive warfare. That the warfare, in comparison with warfare in Elizabethan times or warfare in the 17th century. That would have been true in a large part of Europe. Granted, you had some things like coming up to the Battle of Agincourt, the English army were doing, there's a word for it, they were basically going out and burning everything, annoying the French. You had some stuff like that, but most local conflict was quite localized.
Yeah, it definitely is a turning point after the death of Art MacMur Covenant, when he's poisoned in New Ross, and then suddenly, to be honest with you, I think it's mostly down to the politics that's happening in both France and England, because God, where I think between 1440 and 1444, there's definitely a period where everything's starting to relax down in Ireland, but at the same time, England, like we talk about, like why can't the Irish, stop fighting amongst themselves? It's funny how, like, this is a point where the Irish kind of stop fighting amongst themselves, especially when, surprise, surprise, the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds can get along for a change and actually rule the Irish Parliament as Lord Deputy. But at the same time, England is completely broken and divided, under the reign of Henry V, as you can see there with the movie The King. Not really, now granted, not really the best depiction of Henry V, but at the same time, it does give you that tiny little sense that at the time you're dealing with a high conflict. The only problem with the movie The King is it has a very old-fashioned interpretation of the 100 Years' War, that it was a war that was fought between France and England. Not the case in reality. Henry V, and pretty much at his time, what was left of his military was really insanely fractured. He's dealing with massive rebellions in Wales. He's dealing with huge rebellions in the north of England. He's barely holding into his own territories in the south of England, with constant nobles flaring up left, right, and centre. And then the reason why, Henry V is able to invade into France and exploit the situation is because France is facing the exact same problem as well, with all these civil wars kicking off left, right, and centre. One of the biggest ones is fought between Paris and Burgundy at the time, fighting over the crown of France. So even in France, huge, massive civil wars kicking off left, right, and centre. So it's very funny, just as Ireland is starting to get nice and relaxed and comfortable, England and France, that is not the case whatsoever. Why can't you turn around there and say, why can't England and France stop fighting amongst themselves? It's quite funny people don't bring up that, and especially people have.
I mean, that film, like, it tries to, like you said, it tries to turn it into almost like this nationalistic war of like nations, when actually it's just a dynastic feud between two warring houses, no different to the conflicts happening in Ireland, effectively. And again, it just reiterates that point that Ireland isn't this backward, constantly fighting amongst themselves, and this barbarous nation. When it is, but it's because it's no different to the rest of Europe. Everything like that is happening in Ireland is happening in Europe. And same with Scotland. I mean, you've got them at this time in about 1400. You've got the MacDonalds coming across and settling Antrim, and that brings a whole new level to Ulster politics. That would almost seem to have long-term effects. But I agree. It's I would even go as far as to say it's about 1500 that you start to see the end. That's why I use the end of the Gaelic Resurgence there, because then you have the Battle of Knockdoe, you have the Battle of Slieve with the MacDonalds and McQuillans, Quillans even. You've got loads of really big battles in the early 1500s that sort of just start to kick it all off again. But obviously these embers start at the end of the 15th century rather than starting at the beginning of the 16th. So I definitely agree with it tying down and lowering down, but at the same time I feel like a point needs to be raised that how people interpret that war, the 100 Years' War, and not apply it to Irish history as well, in the sense of like everything that you're seeing is happening in Europe as well. It's just I think a bit narrow-sighted.
Yeah,
you could say that the main difference between, like, the main thing that was different about the Battle of Agincourt and the 100 Years' War was Shakespeare. Like, the Battle of Agincourt got brilliant propaganda from Shakespeare. Like, Henry V, that famous speech he makes, which English people still quote. You see it quoted in here and there. So they, like, Shakespeare's probably the best propagandist ever. Like, as in terms of literature, he's brilliant, and he takes English history and makes very good plays based on it. But his version of Agincourt is making what, as Michael said, was a dispute between factions into national disputes.
Definitely agree with that massively. Like, regardless, from my interpretation, as we step into the period of what was it called, James the Usurper Fitzgerald, and what was it called, Seamus the White Earl Butler, for me, that's kind of when, you know, the peak of the Gaelic Resurgence starts to calm down and relax as well. Although, like, obviously, as Michal and myself had said at the very start, you know, when do you put a date on the start of the Gaelic Resurgence and when can you put a date of the end of the Gaelic Resurgence is very much a debatable thing. Like, you know, here we have maps that clearly highlight that the Gaelic Resurgence started to calm down and relax around 1450. And I would definitely kind of agree with that one as well, that it's not a case of like there's a sudden end date, that it just kind of calms down and relaxes. And then we have the Tudors coming in and going against trying to recolonize and put together, you know, English Ireland again in many ways. So I suppose that that's kind of an area where we can start to wrap down and end this conversation is when exactly can you put an end to the Gaelic Resurgence? Is it a case that it just slowly dissolves and disappears, you know?
Yeah, in a way it does, but it also disappears with the rise of the House of Kildare. Sort of, sort of people, they often talk about, oh, the Pale, English rule in Ireland was reduced to the Pale. It was, but then, as you can see on that map, you have those three lordships. And they were very powerful lordships. And Kildare almost monopolizes the Lord Deputy. And they use the position of Lord's Deputy to give themselves more power, but also to bring about a sort of a Pax Kildare, if you like. You know, they manage to stop some of the constant fighting, but they establish a fairly, not balanced, a fairly stable political entity that lasts quite long, and it only collapses because of the idiocy of Henry VIII. So I think the Gaelic Resurgence had run its course, had lost kind of power in a way, and then the Kildare, you have the rise of Kildare, and you have a kind of a balance then between, you have various lordships, some are Gaelic, some are English, and there is a balance. If Henry and then the Tudors hadn't, well, Henry was a Tudor, if they hadn't made such a mess of asserting a sort of centralized power, because the Tudors hated local powers, if they hadn't done that, you could have had a very stable, a much more stable society emerging.
Yeah, I think the Kildare ascendancy, where they were basically uncrowned kings of Ireland, is a term coined for them. It's funny, you have the more Irish than the Irish themselves for the Desmond branch, and then you seem to have uncrowned kings for the Kildare branch. And it's even funnier that, you know, it almost didn't happen. You know, that not like, well, in like 1400 or something like that, the dynasty was nearly completely wiped out with the fifth Earl's death, and then it's only because Henry VI, was it, recognized Fitzgerald, Thomas Fitzgerald the seventh Earl. You know, so, and then suddenly with that traction, they were able to, you know, Gerald Moore and stuff like that were able to capitalize on that. But yeah, I mean, they go from the smallest, probably the least important of those three families you see on that map, to for I think nearly a century? Is it like nearly a century? But they become the most dominant.
For sure. Okay, so I'll start tidying up the chat now. I just want to thank you. Go on.
I threw into our private chat because I can't seem to get to the chat. the details for getting that calendar. If you look at our private chat and just throw them into the main chat so people can see it.
I just wonder if I click on this, would it be able to jump into all of those? If you don't mind, just okay. If you don't mind, just checking your own private chats there to see if that link got in there. Just actually, I might fly around as well. That's just the link there for that. It's the link for the calendar, is it?
Yeah.
I'll put it on mine here. Sorry.
Hopefully I can get a hold of a copy for myself as well. But regardless, and I just want to go and check if that's popped up. Actually, I'm actually over in your chat now, so I can actually post that over to your chat there, Dr. Owen O'Neill, and
I've done mine.
My one's popped up as well, so that's grand, right? So I just want to thank everybody for coming over today for this conversation. The comment section today, once again, absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for all the feedback and all the questions as well. And thank you so much, Caveman, as well, for prompting me a good few times. There's a few times myself and Michal went into a little bit of a tangent. And Caveman, especially when it comes down to early on, when he gave that nice little prompt of the Black Death, definitely means the world for me, Caveman. So thank you so much for all your comments and prompting us to get back into the main conversation as well. And I just want to thank everybody as well for all the questions and stuff. When it comes down to Viking Limerick and stuff, I definitely will expand on those conversations definitely later on. Tonight now, I just want to kind of tidy up everything, especially when poor Michal and Dr. O'Neill have to get up nice and early tomorrow for work and various other bits and bobs. So I kind of want to send those lads off to bed, especially when it's starting to get very late now over in Ireland compared to over in the States. But regardless, if you want to support my work, definitely head over to my Patreon, and you can send me whatever money is grateful to you. That would mean the world to me. And of course, as well, I also do classes on Sunday night as well. So if you're interested in that type of stuff, definitely head over to my Patreon. It's about 20 quid a month, not too bad. And this week, on this Sunday, we'll be covering what life was like in Ireland in the early 13th century. So definitely head on over there and check that out. Also, next week as well, on the 19th, myself and Rachel will be doing a live stream as well, where we'll be covering clothing of the Desmond Fitzgeralds in the 15th century. So we'll be putting together clothing to do with the 15th century and doing a little GoFundMe to try to see if Rachel can put together some clothes and make some clothes for me as well. So definitely, if you're interested in 15th century clothing, definitely head on over there and support myself and Rachel for sure. Dr. Owen O'Neill, if people want to support your work, and also people were also highlighting it in the comment section as well. I don't know if you can find the comment there. People are highlighting the fact to definitely go over to your channel and check out your new video. You've put so much time and effort into it, which is Ireland and Elizabeth I. Can you tell us a little bit about the video, why people should go and check out this video, and also how can people support your work financially as well?
Okay, financially, you can. My Buy Me a Coffee account is just go to my videos and you'll see it. I think it's Ferris Fasa. Buy Me a Coffee, Ferris Fasa, or I have YouTube. Thanks, but Buy Me a Coffee is better. It takes less. YouTube eat money.
They do. They take such a large percentage out. I'm glad that Patreon has changed their terms and conditions for us to get higher percentages.
Yeah. My video on Elizabeth and Ireland is basically looking like Elizabeth is regarded as this wonderful queen in England, presiding over the golden age, etc. She's still like really, really popular. But in Ireland, she was a complete and utter disaster. Yeah. And she has a better reputation than she deserves. She did a lot of bad things, and like her government there was not only inept but also incompetent and corrupt. So it's just an introductory video. I may do more if enough people watch it, etc. People are liking the video, but not many are watching it for some strange reason. YouTube, the first day was brilliant, and then the algorithm I think Elizabeth's ghost changed the algorithm. And
stop. That's what caused, what was it called? Mihal can tell you all about it, but that's what caused the fighting between me and YouTube years back now. And they stopped paying me because I went and it wasn't even like I said anything. I was literally quoting sources at the time about Elizabeth's teeth and the fact that holes were starting to appear on her face. So I wasn't making anything up. I literally was quoting from the source. And YouTube was very much offended by it and actually stopped paying me. So there is massive love from you, kind of definitely some kind of agenda going on with YouTube anyway. I won't delve too much into it because I don't want to be falling off a tower anytime soon. But anyway, what was it called?
Going into a tower and not coming out.
Yeah. But regardless, when it comes down to YouTube itself, it's gone very, weirdly enough, because we go onto YouTube to watch videos, it's gone very anti-videos these days. Most views are in fact coming from, as you see here, live streaming. Live streaming is absolutely amazing. And shorts, that seems to be definitely the way forward lately. So we'll definitely try to continue that kind of stuff. That's why I've kind of gone away from videos, to be quite honest with you, Owen O'Neill. And that's why I've mostly focused on these live streams here and also doing shorts myself. Mihal, if we want to support your work, what's the best way to go about that?
Just watch and like the videos. Comment would be great, but likes are probably the best thing. As for, you can become a member, and I do members only lives on a Thursday. So this week we're doing, and I think my memberships, there's a couple of tiers, but some are very cheap. We're doing the continuation of the Norman invasion of Munster. So from I did the initial one last week, but if you become a member, you can watch the old videos as well. So that'd be great. But apart from that, I'm like Philip, I'm just sort of taking a wee step back from long form content. It's not worth the time and effort that you put into it for the return you get from YouTube at the minute. But it doesn't mean I'm not working on things in the background. So like I said last time we were on live, just watch this space. There's some interest.
Did we lose on Mihal, did we?
I think so. He froze.
Well, anyway, regardless, definitely go over to his YouTube and also TikTok as well and join his members only. Every Thursday night, he covers the various dynasties and families and a nice little presentation. So definitely check that out. Other than that, guys, thank you for all your support. And as always, what can I expand on that one? Oh, yes. And Saturday as well, we'll be covering another live stream as well, where we'll be going into detail about the various clans and dynasties of Ireland as well. So definitely go and check that out.
Well, I'll be doing a live stream tomorrow myself at 7.
Ah, nice. That's 7. Is that 7 o'clock Irish time or American time?
7 o'clock Irish time.
Irish time.
I think it's 2 o'clock American time.
Happy day. 2 o'clock American time. Happy days. That's New York time, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Happy days. But other than that, guys, thank you so much, and slán go bhfuil.
Slán.
See you. Bye.